Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1, Part 1 of What If Deku Got Block Whip Early. Let's get into the story. This sports festival is something the pro know the whole country is watching. I want you to tell the world I am here. Those words that carried great meaning engraved into the soul of Izuku Midoriya even as he walked out to playing field, his heart thumping loudly. This was at the UA Sports Festival. The multitude of spectators roared in a frenzy of excitement as the games were about to begin. This was one of the many opportunities held once a year by UA where an aspiring hero could prove his mettle and gain significant recognition by the pros and country at large, so it wasn't one that Midoriya planned on passing up. He'd prove to All Might that he could control this power he had inherited and become the greatest hero just like him. Midoriya's life had been a roller coaster for the past few months. So many things he never thought would happen in a million years occurred every day, all because he never stopped believing. Born in a world where majority of the populace possessed an uncanny ability known as quirks, there was a particular body of people who oversaw the affairs of justice, dealing and apprehending those who unlawfully utilized their quirks to perform heinous acts, heroes as they were called. That was all Izuku ever dreamed of becoming, using his potentials to save people with a reassuring smile akin to his idol All Might, the #1 hero. But alas, that dream seemed far-fetched when he turned 4 and he was diagnosed as quirkless. He never doubted he'd be a hero for one day, constantly reaching towards that goal. And with a fateful encounter with All Might, he was given the power to do so. The quirk he had inherited from All Might was originally a quirk that stockpiled power and unleashed it with mighty force that made the number hero a formidable force. But upon receiving the quirk that had seen many generations, something odd happened. Izuku, instead of utilizing the physical enhancements of One for All, used a quirk of a former user, Black Whip. With speculations, it was concluded by All Might this new development could possibly lead him to utilize the other quirks of the former user. But even still, this Black Whip was as powerful as the raw power, having being melded with One for All. It had stockpiled so much that upon his first use he lost control, leveling many building in the entrance exams, and over the course of weeks gained slight control, able to unleash its 100% with reduced backlash to specific area of his body. His initial usage, still he suffered great damage from using it. The teacher Mike presenter gave his introduction pertaining to Class 1A, thus signaling them to walk out to the field. True to his praises, they had seen many things even in their short time being students. Experiencing a villain attack at USJ had shown them the weight of a hero's job and how unprepared they were, but that was what drove all of them to become stronger, to jump into situations quickly with precise analysis. He walked out with a nervous look on his face. There were so many people in the stadium all around him. He was surrounded by his focused classmates, each and every one putting on the UA sports uniform, each one of them bent on making a name for themselves. The rest of the departments were introduced into the field while they listened to the instructions given by the pro hero Midnight. It's time for the player pledge. Representing the students from Class 1A, Katsuki Bakugo. Midnight said, her voicing booming throughout the whole stadium as Bakugo, a spiky blonde with red eyes, walked out slowly, hands in pocket. Bakugo and Midoriya had been friends from childhood. That was until the former had gained his quirk and Midoriya hadn't. Bakugo changed, becoming feisty with an explosive personality akin to his quirk. He was more or less a bully with a big pride. Was hurt badly when he finally found out Midoriya, who he had thought useless, had a powerful quirk all along, or so he thought. Izuku couldn't disclose how he got One for All to anyone, and also the way he lost the combat training to Izuku as well, though strengthening his resolve not to lose again. He walked up to the microphone slowly, taking a moment to look around before he spoke. I pledge to win, he said simply, and what the other departments thought was haughty. Bakugo had made enemies with them the previous day, and they weren't too fond of 1A, but Izuku read great meaning to his words. This was a different Bakugo from the one he knew. Midnight explained the first round of the festival was an obstacle course round, a track outside the stadium. Everything went as long they didn't stray off the course. With the explanations, they took their places just in front of an entrance while they waited for the command to begin. Start, Midnight yelled as the students began their run. As they ran, everyone at their own pace into the tunnel. There was a problem. The tunnel was too small to fit each student trying to rush out at the same time, and now they were all huddled in the space. Oh, hey, move. Ouch. Various cries erupted from different angles as each one lamented and pushed against the other. Izuku lay helpless, getting pummeled with flying elbows to his face. This was the first obstacle, he reasoned. It was obvious they all couldn't fit through that tunnel at once. The first sifting, a silent voice said. Then suddenly cold air blew through the whole tunnel, accompanied by a large expanse of ever-growing ice. It swept through the tunnel, extending its reach to even freeze the walls of the tunnel outside it. This ice froze solid. Legs of many students halting then in their tracks, while a boy with half white and half red hair ran out from the tunnel, freezing the ground behind him with every step he took. Sorry, he uttered as he ran ahead. Todoroki had something to prove with this sports festival. Everyone was watching, and most especially his father, the #2 hero. Endeavor, incapable of surpassing All Might, Endeavor resorted to indulge in an arranged marriage, buying off the family of his wife to breed perfect children, so to speak, that could carry out his wish. and overtake the #1 hero, calling his other children failures until he made Todoroki. He brought him up with harsh and grueling training from a young age, with much abuse towards his wife leading to her mental breakdown. Here Todoroki would prove that he would win this festival without using his father's part of his quirk, and so he'd have to be unrelenting and cruel. Out of the tunnel flying in the air were Bakugo, Kirishima, and other Class 1A students who had easily escaped the clutches of the ice. "You half and half bastard, I won't let you win," Bakugo yelled, blasting himself forward with explosions from his hands that were stretched behind him. Many other students had escaped the ice as well, Midoriya too, who scuttled precariously on the ice slowly, most students using their quirks to move forward quickly, but Midoriya knew the amount of times he could use his quirk was limited. Right now he'd have to use his wits and everything he'd learnt to survive. "I've outwitted you, Todoroki. Take this, my special attack," a shrill voice yelled just above Todoroki, who was in the lead. Mind, a short boy with a perverse mind and odd balls stuck to his head shouted. He had used his sticky balls as a platform to boost himself forward, gaining second spot, and now he planned to take Todoroki out, but just as he motioned to pluck more balls from his head, he was slapped out of the air by a mechanical arm just in front of him. "The faux villains from the entrance exams," Midoriya yelled, coming to a halt, as did everyone else. This was one of the many robots placed in the first exams, one that was supposed to be avoided if possible. Just one was a problem alone, as it was so large. Izuku had been able to take one out before at the expense of his body, but now there was a great number of them blocking their path. "If they'd gone through this trouble, I wish they'd have prepared something better," Todoroki said coldly as the robot's motion to attack ice surrounded his left leg with jutting chunks while his left arm was engulfed in the cool mist. Slowly bring it to the ground erupted large waves of ice that crept fast onto all the robots, freezing and immobilizing them now. Izuku yelled from where he stood, his right arm outstretched, aiming at the head of one of the robots. This was his chance. Now that Todoroki stopped the robots, he'd use his quirk to get an advantage over the rest. From his hand, a black tendril shot. Blinding speed, torrents of wind burst all around him, sending people flying. With a large explosion, the tendril embedded in the robot, dragging Izuku forward. He propelled himself high in the air, shooting off like a rocket, his skin flapping strong against the wind and his eyes tearing up while he took the lead. Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called Anime Theory. Anime Theory mainly focuses on a large variety of mind-boggling anime theories. If you are interested in content like this, please go check the description below or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. Izuku Midoriya from 1A takes the opportunity and blast off into the lead. Mike presenter yelled, "Damn Deku, that bastard." Bakugo yelled, destroying a robot. Todoroki ran as fast as he could to catch up with Midoriya. "He used me to take the lead, tch, he said. "Get out of my way, you half and half bastard," Bakugo yelled, coming in close range with Todoroki. He unleashed a wave of explosion in his direction while Todoroki defended with a wall of ice that shattered into many fragments upon impact while the two jockeyed for position. "I managed to get ahead. Now how do I stop?" Izuku wondering, now plummeting downwards. His right arm hurt badly with many cuts and cracked bones at various angles. The release of his power was too great and damaged him like before. "Oh no, I'm headed towards the next obstacle," he exclaimed. Just up ahead was a large gorge. Below, all around it, were various large rocks and ropes from one end of the gorge to another. "I'm gonna fall in. Think, Izuku said, suddenly getting an idea. He was headed towards the bottom of the gorge if he came close, but the just close by was one of the ropes extended over it. If he could grab it, hopefully it would be strong enough to hold him, but the timing had to be perfect and his grip strong so he didn't slip. 1, 2, 3, Izuku counted, stretching out his arms, grabbing the ropes tightly. The force he incurred caused him to spin round and round, but he didn't let go until he eventually stopped. "Yes, I finally stopped." "Whoa, that's a long way down," he said nervously as he looked down. "Ha, finally caught up to you, bastard. I'm gonna win this, not you, idiot." A loud voice called from behind. Craning his neck, he saw Bakugo headed towards him with top speed. Quickly, Midoriya began to crawl forward upside on the rope. He had the lead, but he knew it wouldn't be for long. Bakugo had the speed advantage here, and using his quirk now wasn't an option. He'd have to save it for later. Easily, Bakugo and Todoroki caught up and overtook Midoriya, reaching the landmine field first. They resumed combat each other slowly, making sure not to trigger the landmines. Other students made their way through it, some sent flying, other making slow and steady progress. Midoriya managed to finish the obstacle, but rather late. Many people had now gotten ahead, completing the landmine field. Now Bakugo and Todoroki were on the last stretch to return to the stadium. "I'll never make it in time. Think, Deku, what can I do?" His eyes looked round frantic as his brain formulated a plan. The only conclusion he could come to was using his quirk again. He'd have to use Black Whip one more time if I want to win this. The plan this time was similar to before, but this time he'd use his two hands. Hopefully he'd have a chance to go to Recovery Girl before the next round, aiming his two hands far out at the ground just behind the two ahead. He wouldn't want them to be caught up in the range of the explosion that would fall. It's now or never. I'll win this, he yelled, simultaneously shooting out those whips from his arms. They shot ahead with such celerity those on the landmines flew away due to the shockwaves. Those tendrils then drilled and stuck into the ground. Midoriya gripped it, propelling forward fast while retracting the tendrils, shortening them whole, blazing forward. Bakugo and Todoroki were in a heated rivalry. Ice and smoke whipped up all round them, both about to reach the entrance to the stadium. Who's gonna get to the stadium first? Mike Presenter yelled, the crowd rooting loudly. The winner is, Mike said, stalling slightly. Todoroki's feet almost first over the threshold into the stadium like a bullet. Midoriya shot through the air. He was almost close. He could make it and win this round. Sailing ahead, his frame came in between Bakugo and Todoroki. The winner is Todoroki. Midoriya, with a valiant display of his quirk, earned second place with Bakugo just behind him, just an inch away. Midoriya would have secured the victory. Don't you think so, Eraserhead? Mike yelled over the microphone. He wasn't fast enough. Midoriya has been greatly slowed down by the other obstacle. If he had just been a second later, he'd won. His landing wasn't graceful either, tumbling all throughout the stadium with many scrapes and cuts. His arms were damaged badly as well. You did great, Deku. You'd have won it. I guess you should see Recovery Girl before we start the second round, Uraraka said cheerily with a smile on her face. Midoriya smiled back, blushing hard, listening to her as he rushed over to Recovery Girl, quite sad his efforts didn't secure him first place. Don't beat yourself up, kid. You did good. You've got the second and final round to make up for it, All Might said to him while she tended to his wounds, making sure not to exhaust much of his stamina so he could continue. The second round came, a cavalry battle where a team of 4 was required to steal points from the other team to win. Only the first 4 could advance to the next round. Deku teamed up with Uraraka, Hatsune from the support course, and Fumikage from his class and were able to secure the third spot in this round. Coming in first was Todoroki's team, who defended their 10 million points flawlessly. Bakugo team fell in just behind them. It all laid for 15 nerve-wracking minutes, but he succeeded and moved to the final round. The final round consisted of one-on-one battles. The only way to win was to push your opponent out of bounds, immobilize him, or cause him to surrender, and first up was Midoriya going up against Shinso from the General Studies. Ajiro, before the commencement of the finals, told him about his weird quirk, warning him don't respond to his questions or else you get caught in his mind control. I fell for it and worked on his team until I bumped into someone. I was under his control. The possibility of you bumping into someone is 0, so you've got to be careful. Beat him from you and me. He remembered his word clearly, standing off with Purple Head. The signal for the match to begin went. That monkey was going on about his pride earlier, but I think he's a fool for throwing his chance away. Shinso said he had thrown a few questions earlier to which Midoriya ignored, but he had obviously and quite easily struck a chord with this one. Don't you talk about Ajiro that wa. Midoriya started angrily moving forward before he stood immobile, caught under the mind control. Now turn around and walk out of bounds, Shinso said. Midoriya complying, blindly turning back. He took step after step, getting closer to the boundary line. What's this? Midoriya's obeying him, Mike Presenter said, to dismay of his classmates who yelled to snap him out of it. What's this? I can't control myself. Is it over? Even though everyone is counting on me. Huh. Just as his leg was about to cross the line, Midoriya saw a vision where 7 shady figures stared out to him, one resembling his teacher All Might. But there was one more vivid than the rest. He stood with his palm outstretched with the Black Whip quirk Izuku used emanating from it. Energy surged through him as One for All channeled its way into his hand. Boom. A huge gust of dust engulfed him. Shinso was shocked, so was everyone watching, wondering what had happened. The dust cleared, but Izuku wasn't there, just a crater on the boundary. Look above, he's in the air, someone yelled from the crowd as everyone turned their attention and heads up, seeing Midoriya flying over towards Shinso, who now looked scared, yelling out questions to Midoriya, trying to get him under his control again. Stepping back as the lad was flying towards him, balling up his right fist that appeared burned. He clenched his teeth, drawing back his arm. He couldn't respond to Shinso, but his expression said it all as he landed a strong right hook, his fist finding Shinso's jaw with such force that it sent him flying out of bounds. Midoriya wins and he advances to the next stage. Mike Presenter roared in ecstasy, likewise the spectators. I did it. I won, Midoriya said to himself, clenching his fist. Looking at a devastated Shinso, he couldn't help but understand the boy's pain. Just like him, Shinso sought to be in the hero course but was transferred to general course as he couldn't complete the practical aspect of the entrance exam. This was one of the only opportunities he had to transfer to the hero course. Don't look at me with pity, Midoriya. I haven't given up on my dream yet. I'll become a hero regardless of whatever happens, Shinso said as he walked out of the arena. Midoriya giving a brief nod in response. He went over to Recovery Girl to get his injuries tended to, who spoke out of concern while she kissed his injuries. You need to stop getting injuries like this. You've been here twice already. There's a limit to how much I can heal you, you know. she said. All Might, I have something to tell you, though we established that I acquired the quirk of a predecessor's first. Something odd happened while I was under Shinso's trance. I saw 8 shady individuals in a vision. One of those silhouettes belonged to you, or looked like you rather, and only one was very clear. The owner of the Black Whip quirk. I saw him clearly, then I was able to break the hold. What do you think it means, All Might? Izuku asked the number 1 hero questioningly. Well, something like that has happened to me in the past. I saw a vision quite similar to yours, but you were able to see one of those figures clearly. Those are fragments of the spirits of the former users of this quirk that were ingrained into it. You being able to see that means the quirk is becoming more attuned to your body at a fast rate. It's a good sign, young Midoriya, the veteran, responded. The other matches took place rather quickly while he was getting healed. Bakugo had won his easily, and even more easily did Todoroki win his. Midoriya knew what that implied. He was in a bracket where he'd have to face Todoroki next. Earlier on, Todoroki had already made a bold declaration to defeat him. It seemed he had something to prove in this sports festival, something related to proving to Endeavor, his father, the number 2 hero, he could thrive and win without using his right side. It's Shoto's duty to surpass All Might as the number 1 hero, so don't disgrace him or yourself by holding back. Hit him hard, Endeavor said to him just minutes ago, words that held command and significance. Now a match you all have been waiting for, the second stage of this finals. From Class 1A Shoto Todoroki. And also from Class 1A Izuku Midoriya. Mike Presenter's voice boomed, snapping him out of his train of thought. This was it, his toughest challenge yet. Though he was nervous, he didn't plan to lose. With a deep breath and clenched fists, he walked out into the lively stadium, walking all the way into the arena, staring down at Todoroki, whose gaze was as cold as ever. So here we are. Todoroki started with a slight exhale. Yeah, and only one of us is going to win, Midoriya replied him with equal intensity. Begin. Right off the bat, a large geyser of ice erupted from Todoroki's left side, heading towards him with great speed. Midoriya's right arm extended with his palm open, his left arm keeping it steady with holding the forearm, his legs apart, crouched low while his feet dug down to keep his balance. Smash! He yelled, coursing one for all as a large tendril shot from his palm at lightning speed, piercing the columns of ice with such concentration it would shatter the ice first before a secondary attack of wind pressure followed. The pressure, now free to move without obstructions, sent Todoroki crashing into the support of ice he placed behind himself, sending him flying quickly with his left arm out as he tumbled. Todoroki guided a curved ice column to accommodate his being, halting his progression. So the whip breaks the defense and the wind pressure attacks, he thought to himself, rising up from the ground while he formulated a plan. He attacked too fast. If I hadn't used Black Whip, I'd have been out from the start, Midoriya thought to himself, holding his right arm. The backlash from shooting the Black Whip with so much force had broken his bone inside. Pain spread through his arm and he whimpered slightly, watching Todoroki carefully. The way he used Black Whip itself was in reference to the display of brute strength All Might made use of, quite unsuitable for the type of quirk it was, but it was the only way he knew how to fight. For now, I won't have much time to use Black Whip for much longer. I need to find a weakness, he said with heavy breaths. I've seen it. That instant, another wave of ice shot out from the earth quickly with great height towards Midoriya. Using his left arm, he forced the lifeless right back up, shooting out another tendril in response, shattering the ice. Wait, what's this? Todoroki used the ice as a facade to get close to Midoriya. Mike Presenter's voice brought him to the realization of an impending danger. His head turned to his right where Todoroki had appeared. Everything seemed to go slow as the lad clawed out his left air ice, following, aiming to freeze him dead in his spot. Responding under impulse, his body ducked low to the earth, the wave flying above. Using that broken right arm with torn muscles to support himself on the ground, his body screamed out in agony, which he paid no attention to. With adrenaline in action, how couldn't I have noticed him coming so close? Wait, this is my chance. If I could control this quirk to grab him without killing him, I could send him flying out of bounds. Come on. Adjusting his balance, he turned sharply, aiming his left arm at Todoroki with such focus the tendril shot out, reaching and wrapping him. Midoriya grasped the whip, throwing him with force, pain searing through him as blood spilled from his arm. Reaching out behind him, a wall of ice formed, his body crash and destroying the ice on impact. Whoa, Midoriya just threw Todoroki that seemed like a damaging blow. Frost crept onto his body quickly. Reducing temperatures drastically caused Todoroki to get frostbites that impeded him. Izuku noticed it, yelling in frustration, come on, Todoroki. You haven't landed a scratch on me. I'm giving it my all here and you're holding back your power. I don't know what you've faced, but if you can't bring out your all, you'll never become number 1. Those words from Midoriya seemed to snap Todoroki awake. Remembering memories, he has forgotten about his mother. Free will to use the power given to him, that was what she had told him. I see now. You reminded me something I had once forgotten. Thank you, Midoriya. From his right side, steam began to form. Those frostbites evaporated from his body. A great burst, a large conflagration of fire engulfed Todoroki, causing a fire cyclone around him. The cool air that swept the arena once was replaced with hot air. Midoriya smiled. His words had gotten through. Let's end this, Midoriya, Todoroki said. Ice grew from his left side rapidly, faster than ever, and his fire burnt brightly with great ferocity. Cementos, the judge of the match, had felt the gravity of what was going on, knowing these two boys could harm themselves beyond cure, erected large walls of cement as a barrier between the two. Midoriya, with two hands broken, sucked it up, knowing he had to give his all in this last attack. With his fist clenched so tightly, he noticed multiple tendrils emanating as they were closed, while Todoroki prepared his final attack of Flash on. Inspiration and idea swept through him. Just at that moment, he withdrew his fist, releasing it forward. Three black tendrils shot from his clenched knuckles with such celerity the air around them became concentrated like spears. Simultaneously, Todoroki lifted his right arm slowly. The arm glowed a bright red as an overwhelming amount of fire engulfed the arena, destroying those walls and colliding with the force of Midoriya's attack. Bright light and storms of debris with dust whipped round whole stadium, clouding vision. Instantly silence throughout the stadium. Everyone was waiting calmly for the dust to settle to see who had won the final exchange. Midnight and Cementos, who had been thrown away, rose to get their bearings as well. That was something else. I don't believe my eyes. That final attack destroyed the whole arena. I can't see ... Wait, I see someone. Todoroki. Todoroki is out of bounds. Midoriya is the winner. Mike Presenter yelled. It took a while for the spectators to see what he was talking about until the dust cleared. The whole stadium roared. Just out of bounds into a wall was an unconscious Todoroki with his clothes torn. His body bore many bruises and cuts. Midoriya lay in the ring, far worse, with his arms mangled and twisted, not moving, but one notable thing was his left hand that had a tendril rooted to the ground. He had done that in the split second of attacking to ensure he didn't fly out of bounds. During the exchange, truly a spectacle to behold. Stretchers came to pick up the two boys, taking them to Recovery Girl. She'd need to give a status update on Midoriya's situation to see if he could compete. While that was a thrilling match, we just received news from Recovery Girl. Though Midoriya won the match, his injuries are too grave to continue in the finals, so sadly he'll have to forfeit. But what an exhilarating match that was, don't you think so, Eraserhead? Your students are wild. Now let's move on. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to part 2 season 1 of What If Deku Had Black Whip Early. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the story. Boom! A large explosion sent debris flying everywhere. Metal crumpled, being distorted with great force as a burly figure crashed into the train headed to Shinjuku while it was passing through Hasu. The faces of the passengers were ridden with confusion. That quickly changed to horror when they realized what had just come aboard their train. It was far from human. With grayish-green skin, the figure had a long torso. Attached to it were equally long arms with incomplete fingers. But that was one of its least terrifying features. Its see-through head set the monster's brain on full display, and those mindless eyes that seemed to focus nowhere gave off a feel that it could kill without batting an eye, literally. To those in the train, it was a monster, but those who knew better called it a Namu. The Namu loomed over a person that was sprawled across the train. It was a hero who had been rammed by the Namu into the train. The male bled and groaned weakly, unable to move. The Namu reached out to take hold of the male and finish the job. Stay put, Gran Torino ordered his student Izuku Midoriya, who was about to bolt into action, to help. The old-timer wouldn't let his student face such an ominous figure while he was here. Instantly, from the holes under his boots, pressurized air shot out, propelling him forward with a big burst. He dashed to the right side of his train, propping his legs onto the side of the train with more wind pressure. He shot to the right, moving forward rapidly, coming to the Namu with a strong kick to its chest. The force sent it backward. Then Torino flew back to the side of the train, shooting off with a greater intensity to ram his being into the Namu. Gran Torino blasted off the train, with the Namu through the hole it created. They sailed through the air, crashing into a building far off the rail tracks. Just as the train came to an abrupt halt, Izuku dashed from his position towards the hole. Standing on the tracks, he looked out to the scene of the city of Hasu. Fires set off at different places, buildings destroyed with sirens, and everyone was yelling. What happened here? Izuku muttered to himself, shocked, wondering what occurred. A student of UA, Izuku strived to become a hero with the power he had inherited, one for all. Many days ago, UA had held their sports festival where fierce events were held. He had proved his mettle, but not to the extent he wished. Having defeated Todoroki, a rival of his, he was unable to continue fighting due to the damage to his body by using the Black Whip quirk, which was why he resolved to use the internship program to find a way of using his quirk without incapacitating himself in battle. It was such a problem to him that he hadn't gotten any requests from agencies to intern with them. That was before Gran Torino, the former master of his idol, The #1 hero All Might had taken him under for internship, and with just 3 days training with him, Izuku overcame the risk of using it before by using a minute percentage that his body could handle. Also learning to use it in various situations, though most of the usage weren't attacking, he was ecstatic to try it out. Constantly fighting Gran Torino would pay its dividends in helping to achieve that level with his quirk. Now that he found himself in this situation, his thoughts brought him to Lita, his classmate who was interning here in Hasu. During the sports festival, Lita's older brother, a hero, had been brutally assaulted by the menace hero killer Stain, a villain who hunted and killed heroes. His brother was alive but not unscathed. Tensei would possibly never return to the field again. Midoriya worried about Lita's mental stability, but the lad had reassured him he was fine, though it was hard to believe. I wonder how Lita's doing. He hasn't replied my texts yet, Midoriya thought to himself, glancing at his phone before he put it back into his pocket. He'd deal with that later. Now he had to go see what was happening and possibly find Lita as well. The green-haired lad readied himself with his clenched right fist. He aimed at the top of a building. Activating his quirk, a black tendril shot out from his knuckles, latching firmly onto the building. He grasped the tendril, jumping off the rail tracks. Midoriya became suspended in air. Quickly his legs came together, arching his body backwards. He swung his legs out, shooting forward into the night. This was one of the techniques he had invented while training. It had come to him when he realized the similarities between his quirk and Zero's. While fighting Torino, he studied how he zipped around so quickly without warning, going where he pleased. It was obviously the work of quick decision-making, to ensure he was aerial and did not tumble and crash, something he combined with his notes on Zero's quirk to birth his technique. Okay Midoriya ... you got this, just release the whip once you finish the swing and shoot a new one, he said to himself, trying to psyche himself. It was the first time he was doing this out in the open. Though he'd practiced, the real deal was entirely different and scary at the height he was. Once the whip shot him upwards, he timed himself, retracting the whip, now floating momentarily. He aimed to shoot another tendril at a building, but his aim was off. Midoriya now plummeted downwards, his arms and legs swinging wildly as his heart thumped, his brain trying to assert the situation. Taking another aim, the tendril shot at the building, this time hitting its mark, saving him from impending doom as he bounced up and down trying to stabilize himself. I almost died there. I have to be more careful and be more accurate with my aim, he said to himself with heavy breaths. He was scared but pulled ahead, shooting off with whips, getting better with each shot. So many things had drastically changed concerning him. Originally he thought he'd have super strength like All Might, but had gotten this quirk instead. Still, he hadn't quite grasped how to use it, and in his moments of confusion he'd used it similar to All Might's fighting style. Not pretty wise for a quirk that was mostly a supporting quirk. But it was as equally powerful, and with each passing day it grew clearer to him how he should use his quirk. Even his suit, which was green, was changed now, as he has dyed it black, similar to his quirk's color, but his respirator and boots remained the same. Sailing through the air, he came across a scene of various pro-heroes combating another Namo. There's another one. What's going on? Izuku thought to himself as he dropped down. He saw Manuel, the pro-hero whose agency Lita was interning with, but there was no sign of Lita. I'm looking for Lita, where is he? He asked Manuel, coming up to him. Sorry, I don't know where he is. Lita ran off a while ago, Manuel said hurriedly as he controlled a hydrant, drawing out water to put out a fire. Wait, it was Hasu where Lita's brother had been assaulted, and the hero killer was known to strike at a place more than once. Tensei had been the first. Could that mean Lita rushed off after catching whiff of the hero killer for revenge? Izuku's green eyes opened wide in realization of what could be happening this moment. Down in a dark alley, secluded from where chaos and attention of everyone else was, two figures lay sprawled on the ground. One was the hero native. He was hurt, bleeding from stab wounds and immobile. Standing over the other body was the hero killer, with his multiple blades strapped all around him. His shady appearance alone carried such an overwhelming presence it would strike fear into the weak-hearted, acting out of vengeance. That's one thing far from a hero, Stain said. He retracted the blade lodged in the shoulder of Tenya, slowly bringing the cold steel stained with warm blood to his lips. He licked the blade, smearing his tongue with the blood. Stain's quirk took effect instantly, paralyzing the lad. The villain raised the blade up once more, about to strike down and deal the finishing blow. Just as Stain was about to drive his blade home, a black blob slammed into his face with such force he was sent flying. The blob seemed quite malleable and ricocheted the entire alley before dissipating. A sharp sound pierced through the air. A very quick black tendril had shot out. Lashing out, it sent home into Stain's jaw with enough power it sent him flying down in the alley, making a sharp thwacking sound. Izuku stood at the other end of the alley holding his right arm out. His fist was clenched and the whip slowly retracted back to the spaces in between his knuckle. THJS was a way of offense he'd created with the quirk. Utilizing the power and speed of the whip, He aimed and sent the whip flying squarely into a target. The density and strength of the whip coupled with its power and speed was enough to stun and deal minor damage. "Tenya, are you alright? Can you move?" Izuku said, hastily taking a slight glance at Tenya and the pro hero while being wary of Stain's presence. "No, I can't. He immobilized me with his quirk, I think," Lita groaned. Stain looked on surprised at Izuku's self-as act. He'd test the boy further to prove his mettle. "What will you do, hero?" "I plan to kill these two," Stain said, brandishing his blade. His brain began to process what was going on. With Black Whip he could easily take both Lita and Native swinging off, but his speed and reaction time in itself was nowhere near Stain. The villain would easily catch up to him if he tried to run, and they'd be in a worse situation. It looked like holding him off was the only option. "Stay out of this, Midoriya, it doesn't concern you," Lita yelled in frustration. This was his battle to fight to avenge Tensei. "Then how will heroes be able to do anything if that's the case, Lita?" Midoriya responded with guts, clenching his fists with his legs apart, his eyes on the villain. HMPH Stain sighed with a smile. "Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called Anime Theory. Anime Theory mainly focuses on a large variety of mind-boggling anime theories. If you are interested in content like this, please go check the description below or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now with that out of the way, let's get back into the story." Stain charged at the lad with great speed, blade in hand. He struck out, slashing horizontally at Izuku while using his dagger to hack down. Once Stain came in mid-range with him, Izuku's hand opened up. He aimed at the wall to his left. A whip shot out, zipping him to the wall. He leapt off it with his body arched backwards, swinging his right leg forward to attempt a strong kick to the side of Stain's head. The villain instinctively raised his left arm, blocking the kick and pushing the lad back with force to destabilize him. While Izuku was unbalanced in midair, Stain swerved right, unraveling his sword to slice him. "Bind," Midoriya thought, giving mental instructions to his quirk, telling it what to do. A curved whip escaped from his hand, wrapping itself tightly around the incoming sword. He guided the blade upwards with the whip to change its trajectory and remove it from Stain's grasp. But his grip was firm on his blade. Even though the blade moved up, he wouldn't let go. With the dagger on his left, Stain aimed a straight jab to Izuku's midsection, edging forward with that monstrous speed of his. A sadistic smile written across his lips with his tongue hanging out. Barely, Izuku had gotten his right hand in between the blade and his stomach. A projectile whip he used for attacking shot out of his hand, hitting the blade's tip at point blank, knocking it out of Stain's hand. Stain's left arm flew backwards, leaving his chest wide open. With that 5% of Black Whip he was using, Izuku seized the opportunity, firing another whip. It drove into Stain's chest, sending Stain crashing into the opposite wall, simultaneously Midoriya releasing the whip on the villain's sword as he dropped down to the ground. The villain rose unfazed, picking his dagger that was close by. That moment he was occupied with his blade. Izuku lunged forward, aiming to catch him off guard. Whiplash, his words were caught short as he stood just in front of Stain, immobilized, dropping to the ground like a body bag. "But how? He didn't cut me," Izuku wondered. Speculations about Stain's quirk implied he had to be cut before his quirk became active. Straining his eyes, he looked up. Midoriya saw Stain's tongue to his dagger, realizing just now that when his hand came in between the blade he had been pricked. It was that blood Stain licked which was why he became immobile, he thought, finally understanding how the quirk worked. The villain walked over to Tenya slowly. This battle was more than one to him. He'd dispose of this too worthless hero and keep that boy alive. He had potential to become a true hero, Stain thought. His sword retrieved now, Stain drew his weapon back for the final blow. Suddenly a column of ice grew across, with jutting spikes aimed to hit the villain. Rising up along with the ice was a wave of fire. "You should have been more specific in your message, Midoriya. I was late because of that," the half-and-half boy Todoroki said, a cool mist escaping his lips. Earlier on, Izuku had sent him his location hurriedly since he realized Todoroki was in the area, and now it had just saved Lita. The battle between Todoroki and Stain ensued, with columns of ice and waves of fire. Todoroki aimed to keep Stain at a considerable distance from the rest, but with such speed Stain evaded and advanced easily. Stain saw it grasping him. He drew the lad near, aiming to lick the blood off his face, but as he came close Todoroki's left side, scalding flames erupted, causing the villain to withdraw. Instantly, without delay, Stain went on the offense again, dashing at Todoroki without giving time for him to react. He was a second away from cutting Todoroki. A black whip wrapped Todoroki, yanking him back just in the nick of time. Midoriya had regained his mobility, pulling Todoroki to his side. With this, he surmised there was a probable time limit to which the quirk had various lengths on people. Midoriya listed possible ways the effect could last, wondering what it was as he'd been released earlier than Native and Lita. Yes, you're correct, it's the blood-type Stain said, affirming his hypothesis. Not that it mattered whether they knew how the quirk worked. His goals were close to completion. If he got past this too, those fake heroes would be erased and served as a wake-up call to the Hero Society. All that pent-up emotions, Lita had been storing all this while flowed out with tears, expressing his regrets to Izuku and Todoroki. If that's the case, then stand up and fight, Todoroki said, urging and motivating him while they lunged in at the Hero Killer. Todoroki used his ice to set the terrain for Izuku. Whilst attacking Hero Killer, skillfully Midoriya used those ice shards to propel himself through the alley with his tendrils. He grasped a tendril, holding it like a torture whip, extending it whiplash to crack it down on Hero Killer. But he was one step ahead. Using the ice to his advantage, he slid low below Midoriya's reach, hacking at him again. This time he cut his leg cleanly. Stain ingested the blood, paralyzing him again. He didn't stop there. With that sliding moment, he slid closer to Todoroki, quickly closing the distance. The lad threw out large volumes of flames to deter him from coming close, also melting the ice field in the process. But Stain was smarter, using his katana as a guide. He dug into the ice, pushing up to his left side. He slid all the way off the side of the ice field, pivoting upwards to Todoroki's right side, avoiding his attack. You're weak in close range, that's why you try to keep me away, Stain said, about to cut his flesh. Reciproburst. Lita's voice rang throughout the alley. He had overcome the effect of the quirk, quickly sending his engines into overdrive. He accelerated in between Hero Killer and Todoroki, landing a spinning kick to the side of his face. Great propelling force from the engines sent Stain hurtling through the air. He came crashing down to earth, destroying those layers of ice around. Todoroki smiled slightly in recognition of Lita's newfound will. He grew faster and quicker, throwing blades at Todoroki. Using his body, Lita blocked, taking those blades for Todoroki as the metal pirouetted and lodged into his flesh. Todoroki's attacks now seemed useless. Stain was just rampaging now. He had to quicken his pace and kill those two before the pros arrived. Freeze my engines, Lita said to Todoroki. He could only use Reciproburst once because of the heat and strain it put on his engines, but with the ice it had cooled down, allowing him to use his quirk a bit longer. Todoroki complied, ice forming all over the engines with steam of heat leaving Lita's legs. Midoriya began to regain his mobility once more, rising to his feet gingerly while the effects slowly wore off. He knew they'd have to take Stain down now. With the pace he was going now, he could possibly succeed. It was now or never. Taking his stance, Midoriya stretched forth his arms, clenching both fists. Activating his quirk, Midoriya brought forth a large multitude of tendrils from between his knuckles, all making their way towards Stain. The villain didn't pay much bother to them. He adeptly hacked away at them, knocking them away from him, but Midoriya kept on going. The lad redirected each tendril, knocked away at a faster speed. Beads of sweat rolled down his face as he focused, concentrating on what he was planning. The Hero Killer fended off the offense quite easily for the first few rounds, but with the large numbers and increasing speed, even he was quite taken aback, and while he fended off, one another grabbed him until the tendrils had restrained him. Stain wiggled furiously to free himself, but it was no use. The tensile strength and power of the whip could bench press a bicycle effortlessly as he'd tested, thanks to the quirk acquiring enormous strength from being in One for All. There was no way Stain was escaping that. Leader readied himself to attack. He crouched low to his knees, his engines revved with such ferocity the ice melted. He timed Stain to the moment Midoriya's immobilized him. Go, Midoriya urged Lita to deal the decisive blow. Thank you, Midoriya, Reciproburst, Lita said. He shot upwards as he sailed through the alley. Lita drove his right knee into Stain's chin, the metal of his suit clanging against the jaw as Stain with such force Stain did man flips as he was sent landing ungracefully. But that wasn't all. A huge wave of fire was sent his way from behind, colliding with Stain and burning him. The icing to top the cake. The villain was knocked out completely. They had won. Lita and Todoroki both expressed their surprise with how much Midoriya had grown using his quirk. He blushed, stuttering as he spoke, not being used to praises. It was a hard-fought battle, but this experience showed Midoriya how far he had come with this odd quirk, Black Whip. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out, mortals. Have a fantastic day. Hey, what is up, mortals? What if Deku got Black Whip early? Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat, and so we begin. That's it for class today. There's only 1 week left before your final exams begin. I'm sure you're all studying and training hard. Good luck, Aizawa said, encouraging Class 1A before he stepped out of the class. Quite recently, the students' internship with the Pro Heroes had ended and their final exams for the semester was just around the corner. This class had been through a lot in such a short period of time. They'd grown through all those experiences. Now the final exams were approaching and they'd give it their all as always. Izuku for one could attest to that fact. Having participated in the sports festival, he had successfully defeated Todoroki, a rival of his, but couldn't continue in the festival due to damages sustained using his quirk. That was where his journey began. He aimed to find a way to use Black Whip without incapacitating himself during battle. Thus he had interned with Gran Torino. All Might's former teacher and the wise veteran had aided him in finding a way to utilize his quirk. Now, Midoriya released a fragment of Black Whip's power at a time. Not over 5% was his limit. 5% for now was his limit to using his quirk fluently without hurting himself. The quirk was mostly a support type, for grabbing things and restraining villains. But with creativity he had devised means to use it offensively as well. But that wasn't all. During the internship, Midoriya had a bizarre encounter with the hero killer, Stain, and took him down. Not without help, of course. He fought alongside his classmates Lita and Todoroki to bring the villain down. Now it was all over. Midoriya took the time to assess his classmates. He had to admit, they'd all grown considerably. Though most of them had that lively attitude they always did, Midoriya could feel an air of growth to them. They all grew to understand the gravity of their course with each passing day and how important a hero's job was. Once Aizawa left the class, the chatter began. Everyone had something to say. Whether it was relating to their internship or the final exams, they were all eager to talk. But what they talked about mostly were the exams. Some students made plans to study harder in groups for the exam. Others who were top in the midterm test offered to tutor the rest, and those at the bottom of the class just bemoaned their situation. Once it was time, they all went to the cafeteria to grab something to eat. Some students of Class 1 sat round the table speculating what the practical exams could entail. The written exams wouldn't be outside what they'd learn in class, but the practical exams could be anything. They discussed amongst themselves, each student's giving their opinion of what the practicals could be. They talked and brainstormed. Later on, Kendo from Class 1B came around to their table. She told them the practicals would be similar to the entrance exams. She'd gotten some insight from someone who'd been a first year like them. On that note, Class 1 had put their heart to rest. If it was robots, they'd handle them easily like they'd done at the entrance exams. But Izuku was lost in his thoughts, slowly moving back and forth from his thoughts to their conversation. He was reflecting back on the conversation he had with All Might the previous day. The secrets of One for All had been revealed to him. All for One, the progenitor quirk that birthed the quirk he now used. It was also the name of the villain he'd someday have to face. Midoriya wondered how he could accomplish something All Might couldn't complete, even with the enormous stockpiled power of One for All. All Might hadn't come out the battle with All for One unscathed. The threat of All for One was still very real. How would he deal with the greatest villain ever with Black Whip? Time flew. Soon, the written exams were over. Now it was time for the practical exams to begin. "You're changing the exams," the students yelled in confusion. Pro Heroes stood just ahead of them, in front of the gates, to the grounds they were supposed to have their exams. The students were fully clothed in their costumes. Midoriya sported his black suit, with his red boots, knee guards, his respirator, and white gloves. The suit had been customized to go along with the color of his quirk, thus it was dyed black. The test now had a focus, to test them in combat and teamwork against real people, so their exams would be a 2 versus 1 battle against a teacher at UA. The announcement brought about great skepticism. How could they expect students to win against veteran pros? And an even bigger shock came. Izuku and Bakugo had been paired to face All Might. The rules of the test were simple. The students either had to capture the teachers using special handcuffs or escape from them. But it was easier said than done. Even with those handicaps, against pros like this, it was still a huge mountain they had to overcome. Thankfully, Midoriya's exams would come last. It would give him time to think of a strategy against All Might. The matches were underway. Some of the teams succeeded in capturing the teachers with the handcuffs or escaping from their grasp. A few couldn't do either or lost due to exceeding the time limit. Now it was time for the final pair, Midoriya and Bakugo. Izuku really did his best. He had tried to talk to Bakugo so they could strategize going into this exam. He didn't see them winning this in a test to overcome All Might's strength, but Bakugo thought otherwise. It was a fool's paradise that Bakugo sadly lived in. In fact, Bakugo didn't want to hear any of it. He planned to go in and beat All Might all by himself. Simple. Well, not so much to Midoriya. Bakugo didn't like Midoriya's growth. It ticked him off. His quirk was similar to Zero's, nothing so fancy that could rival him, but with the way he used it so adeptly irritated him. He also had this nudging feeling in his gut that Midoriya had more tricks up his sleeves, something he wasn't too happy about. Shut up and get away from me, you bastard. I'll beat All Might myself, I don't need your stupid analysis. Bakugo barked to Midoriya. The green-haired lad trailed behind him as they walked down into the field. It was a commercial setting, with large buildings, streets, and everything you'd see in a bustling city, a perfect setting for his quirk. Midoriya planned to make a quick getaway without encountering All Might at all, whereas Bakugo planned to charge head-on to tussle with All Might. There was definitely no teamwork in play here. A voice boomed throughout the whole field announcing the start of the exams. 562 pounds, Saventwo, the #1 hero, stood at the other half of the mock city. The matchups were set in such a way it would help the students to overcome their weakness. Thus Bakugo and Midoriya were paired. Hopefully they'd put their difference aside and work together to beat him. There would be no prejudice here. Even if Midoriya was his successor, he'd hit them both equally as hard and push them to the limit. All Might's muscular frame bulged from his skin-tight suit. He flexed every single fiber of those muscles as a sort of light exercise. Slowly he raised those massive biceps up. His arms retracted inwards, mimicking a stretch. His arms shot out at either of his sides with such ferocity granted by his quirk. Massive airwaves ripped throughout the city, destroying buildings, sending cars flying and bending metal with ease. The waves tore throughout the city, damaging all that it came in contact with. The practical had begun. Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called Anime Theory. Anime Theory mainly focuses on a large variety of mind-boggling anime theories. If you are interested in content like this, please go check the description below or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. The torrents of wind took them off their feet. Literally, Midoriya and Bakugo were swept off their feet while their argument became heated. The wave knocked them back to reality of the looming threat of All Might. Both boys got to their feet abruptly. Their senses now on high alert, they took fighting stances. How did he get here so fast? Bakugo wondered in confusion. In an instant, the burly figure of All Might emerged from the dust. The commanding presence the #1 hero bore made them break out in cold sweat. With a bold declaration, All Might made it crystal clear he wouldn't hold anything back. He was no more the hero they knew and loved. He'd take on the persona of a villain. Here I come. All Might's enthusiastic voice boomed. His body crouched low. His feet dug into the ground with such power it caused a crater around him. With blinding speed, his huge frame dashed across the street, headed straight at Midoriya and Bakugo. Come at me, you bastard. Let me show you how the next #1 hero fights. Bakugo yelled with a sadistic smile across his face. His right arm was leveled with All Might as his palm lit up red like hot iron. No Kakin, we have to run, Midoriya said. A tendril wrapped round Bakugo's waist just as he was about to launch his attack, yanking him away from All Might. With his left arm, Midoriya swung away. With a tendril latched onto a building, he bound Bakugo hurriedly to make his getaway. Let me go, Deku. Damn it, you idiot, Bakugo yelled in frustration. Using his lit-up right hand L, he grasped the tendril, letting an explosion loose that tore him away from it as he dropped down. No coordination. Cutting loose like that was a mistake, as well as trying to run away, All Might said, easily catching up to the two. He leapt up slightly. His hand reached out, grabbing Bakugo by the head the moment he broke loose from the tendril. Landing to the ground, he sent Bakugo crashing into the road. The boys crushed the tarmac. Bakugo's vision blurred, with probably the little common sense he had left knocked out of him as he lay motionless on the ground. Leaping again, All Might sailed towards Midoriya. The boy was swinging away before he could react. All Might flew above him, grasping the tendril he was using to swing. With mighty strength, he changed Midoriya's course, sending him straight into a building, Midoriya's body shattering the glass and wooden frame of a small window as he dropped to the ground. Trudging slowly, he stopped in the midst of the two, looking on at Midoriya. Don't turn you back on me. I'm the one you should be worried about. I'll wipe that smile off your face, Bakugo said. He flew through the air, using his explosion to propel him forward. All Might turned sharply, clenching his fist. He aimed a punch at Bakugo's midsection, setting to drive it into his gut. Think again, Bakugo yelled. Aiming his right arm down, he let an explosion loose that shot him upwards and over All Might's blow. Sharply turning his body to face the hero's back, he let a burning explosion loose. The impact, like a Gatling gun, hit All Might with extreme force. For any other person, with such a huge offset of explosion and force, they'd be knocked out cold, but it didn't even look like it stung All Might. Good, but not enough, the villain said. He retracted his extended arm sharply, curving it into an elbow that drove into Bakugo's gut, sending him flying yards away from him and tumbling down the road. Bakugo rose with weak knees, but a determined look on face disregarding the fact he'd just puked his lunch. Yeah, that's it. Come at me like that I'm the only one that matters here. You better give it all you got, All Might, because I have to win here by myself. I'd rather lose than to get help from that idiot, said Bakugo with disdain in his voice when he said that last part. Persistently, he lunged for All Might once more. With his palms widespread, the nitroglycerin accumulated began to ignite while he took an aim at All Might. Don't say stuff like that. We're in this to win, aren't we, Kaken? Midoriya yelled. The boy had been able to stand on his 2 feet now after that heavy attack. Bakugo's words obviously didn't sit well with him. He couldn't tolerate the fact that someone as goal-driven to win as Bakugo would say something like that. Striking as quickly as a viper, a tendril shot out hitting Bakugo in the jaw as Midoriya yelled. It disoriented him, pushing him hard away from his path to All Might. But that wasn't all. Number 1 hero or not, All Might had to be stunned momentarily considering the fact that Midoriya had just hit his partner, and the green-haired lad capitalized on that fact in a split second, following up instantly. He willed the whip, causing it to change course as it glided for All Might's eyes. The hero was shocked, but he recovered quickly, putting his arm up to guard his eyes. That was the window Midoriya needed. Without wasting time, he ran quickly, closing the short distance between himself and the two. Midoriya scooped up Bakugo and ran down the street as hard as he could before All Might could get his arm down. Midoriya knew he'd have to make Bakugo see reason to fight alongside him. Without both of them working together, there was no way they'd be able to win. Kaken, we need to talk. There's no way we're going to win this if we don't work together. Once Midoriya ensured the coast was clear of All Might for now, he took a deep breath before he spoke. He had to make sure he was confident and serious now that he spoke to Bakugo. If he couldn't get Bakugo to work out the plan with him, it was over. Wherever could they have gone? All Might said with a gusty laugh as he raced across the town. He was on his search through all the corners of the city for the 2 boys who'd eluded him. It was only a matter of time before he found them. Charging out of a street, Bakugo came. Alone, attacking on your own eye. Well, it's something I expected from you, young Bakugo. I really thought you could work together with Midoriya, but where is he? He's running to the door. I can't allow that now, can I? All Might said, shaking his head as he stopped running. Just up ahead, Bakugo stood blocking his path. Well, we'll just have to go find him together, won't we? He spoke cheerfully, but it was obvious it wouldn't be a fun experience for Bakugo. Bakugo had already prepared. He started his run towards All Might. An explosion set off at his palm, burning fuel in a fiery mass swirling towards All Might. What did All Might do? He became a freight train. But way worse, the hero, villain, whichever you prefer, plowed his way straight through the explosion and into Bakugo. All Might ran at insane speeds, carrying Bakugo in tow. The boy stuck to his torso, all the air driven from his lungs. Everything seemed like a blur, passing his eyes so quickly. Now let's go look for Midoriya, young Bakugo, All Might said, speeding down the road. Bakugo had to do something quick. Let me go, you bastard, Bakugo growled. He struggled to pry his arm from under All Might's arm, placing his hand directly on All Might's face. He had to put his all in one go. Bakugo only had one shot at this. He set off a huge explosion simultaneously. He pushed away, and luckily Bakugo set himself free. Flying high into the air, he flipped backwards to face the hero villain. Yeah, I guess I'll use this now. I was saving it for last, but oh well, Bakugo shrugged slightly. He laced his fingers round the key that kept the nitroglycerin he'd been storing in his gauntlet in check, and with a sharp pull he released it. The tug ignited the combustible fuel that exploded instantly and powerfully. Seas of explosions rolled rapidly towards All Might. The hero stood his ground, running against the tide for a while, but even the powerful hero had his limits, and soon he was swept away and sent flying. Bakugo wasn't spared either. The backlash from releasing that sort of explosion burdened his arm. Instantly he felt excruciating pain well up, as if his joints had been dislodged. He shot high into the air from the force and dropped down slowly while grasping his right arm, wincing as he did. That should keep him busy for a while now, I bet, Bakugo started before he was abruptly cut short. Careening through the air, All Might came. Almost instantly, it was like he wasn't even affected at all. That was a tough one, young Bakugo. Very good, but not enough. Now off to Midoriya, All Might said, as he blazed past Bakugo. He grabbed his left arm, dragging him along, but what he also did was to crush the gauntlet on his left to ensure explosions like that wouldn't happen again. I see the gate far ahead, but I don't see Midoriya, All Might wondered. In an instant he dashed through the city with the gate in sight, but Midoriya was nowhere to be found. Out from an alley came Midoriya, just as All Might had passed it. Now was the time to act and fast. He knew if he'd tried swing to the exit, he'd be seen in the air and All Might would catch up easily. Fighting head-on wasn't an option, but a sneak attack was, plus he had an idea that could work. Bind. Midoriya channeled his quirk. Multiple tendrils shot out from between his clenched knuckles. Each tendril began to branch off till they became numerous and fastened round All Might in an attempt to restrain him. Well, for the meantime, what it did do was divert All Might's attention as he dropped Bakugo, turning his head to face Midoriya. Oh, a surprise attack. Do you think these ropes will hold me, hero? All Might said. Run, Kakin. Cross the gate and win this, Midoriya yelled. Surprisingly, Bakugo, who didn't like taking orders, got to his feet and began and shot off in the air towards the gate, though it was still ways off. All Might pulled against the tendrils, snapping them with ease like knife to butter. He would have pulled Midoriya along to make a run for Bakugo like he'd done earlier. But his legs were meshed together, but it was a matter of time before he was free. Keep going, Kakin, go for the exit, I'll keep him occupied, Midoriya encouraged. He knew tendrils of 5% tensile strength wouldn't hold All Might in the least. He had to take a risk and increase his output of power to put All Might in a difficult position so his thoughts would be diverted, or else his plan would fail. I'll have to crank it to 25%, double, just so it'll hold him for a bit longer. I hope my body can take that amount, Midoriya thought to himself. He set to work, willing and breaking the limiters on his quirk slightly. More whips shot out from his hands, these one more dense, stronger and quick, instantly replacing the former that had been torn, holding fast to the number one hero's muscles and holding him down. Pain seared throughout Midoriya's body, and he felt his insides burning up. It was hard, but he set his mind to focus on his task at hand. Bakugo was now halfway towards the gate. Keep going, Kakin. All Might can't catch up at this rate, Midoriya called. It was quite the big statement from Midoriya considering who All Might was. It was something Midoriya wouldn't normally say, clearly a taunt. One All Might didn't take too lightly. The bonds had toughened, but it would only buy a little more time. All Might's muscle tensed as he tore up the tendrils with such gusto it expelled torrents of air pressure around him. That was quite the bind. But now to end this, All Might said quite anxiously. Now, he had been put down for quite some time and Bakugo was almost through the gate. His only goal right now was to stop him. Bakugo and Midoriya have passed the practical exams. A voice boomed throughout the city, alerting everyone. What? How? Young Bakugo hasn't escaped yet, and Midoriya? All Might said, trailing off as he turned and looked down to his feet. There was Midoriya, and around All Might's ankle was the special handcuffs they'd been given at the start. Fastly wrapped around All Might's ankle also was a tendril that slowly retracted now. It was a big risk, since it was you we were up against, All Might, but we had to take it. Bakugo had to distract you with the plot. I was escaping, which I actually was in real sense, but you caught up too quickly, so I had to improvise. I'd have to hold you down for Bakugo to make the getaway, but all that was a ploy. I knew you could easily catch up to us, so I had to lure you in to think all we really planned to do was escape and not think we'd try to cuff you. If the cuffing didn't work, but I stalled long enough, Bakugo would have crossed the gate and escaped if he could. I'd almost lost hope when you let that wind torrent loose, but I was able to hold on by a loose thread, ironically. Midoriya explained the whole plan he'd formulated with Bakugo earlier. Brilliant yet risky, but they'd pull through with teamwork. Oddly surprising they'd been able to work together. You did well, Midoriya, that was brilliant, and you too, Bakugo. I never believed you two could work together so well. I'm truly proud, All Might said with a look of approval plastered across his face as he looked at the two boys. Midoriya stood weakly on his feet. The output he'd used for far too heavy for his body, and if not for the win, he'd either be incapacitated or unable to fight effectively if the exams pulled longer. He still had ways to go, but for now he'd relish in the facts that he'd passed his practical exams. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? What if Deku got Black Whip early season 1 part 1? Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat, and so we begin. These 3 months aren't for you to slack off. Remember, you're aiming to become pros, so push beyond your limits, Aizawa said to the class of one standing before him, to which they replied with an enthusiastic yes. The class had successfully finished their first semester, rounding off the term with a racy practical exams that put their grit to the test. Some excelled, passing the exams, while others failed, but each and every one of them gained a lot of experience from the exams. I'm pumped for this camp. Aren't you too, Izuku? "What's wrong?" Uraraka said, coming up close to Midoriya. The students were gathered round, waiting to be loaded onto the bus to begin their trip. "Oh, nothing. I'm just a little hot," Midoriya answered nervously. She was so close, something he wasn't used to. He had to avert his eyes so they wouldn't trail off to somewhere else. Being able to put their difference aside, Midoriya and Bakugo were able to pass their exams. They took a big gamble in that exams, which luckily paid off considering they were up against the enigmatic symbol of Peace All Might. Then following that, recently Midoriya had an encounter with Tamura Shigaraki, the villain who had spearheaded the attack on the USJ. Class 1 aborted their L bus. So did 1B, a class with students that mostly felt you were walking in the shadows. Hopefully during this training, tempers wouldn't fly between them. The engines of the buses revved to life and set off on the path towards the camp. The hours seemed to go slowly. At first the bus was bustling with chatter, but it quickly died down as students slept off or sighed tiredly, eager to get off the bus. Finally, the bus came to a halt after agonizing hours. The students groggily stepped out of the bus, stretching their cramped limbs. Midoriya stretching out and yawned till he was satisfied. He looked on in awe, seeing the widespread forest surrounding the mountain range. There was so much vegetation you could hardly see anything, save from trees. Parked just beside the bus was a black car. The doors of the car flew open and out came two eccentric ladies dressed up like cats. None of the students seemed to know who they were, looking on with perplexed faces. Except for Midoriya. He babbled joyfully, explaining who they were. Apparently, these ladies were the heroes they would work with for the training camp. "Then why are we all the way up here?" Uraraka asked, as confused as the others were. They were told their camp was all the way down the mountain, far into the forest, but why were they at the top of the mountain? Slowly the students began to put two and two together, hurriedly turning back to load themselves back onto the bus. "You should have known by now. Your training camp begins now," Aizawa said. Suddenly, the hero in blue known as Pixie Bob jumped in between the students and the bus, startling them. Her hands were to the ground and it lit up blue. The landscape changed in an instant. A huge mass of fluid earth erupted, sweeping the confused students off the top of the mountain down to the entrance of the forest below. "This is private land, so you can use your quirks as you please. You have 3 hours to get to the facility. That's if you can get through the beast forest," Mandalay said to the students down below, who looked nervously at the forest, wondering what she meant by beast forest. Minda scuttled quickly into the forest before he stopped dead in his tracks, unable to move, looking in fear at the huge monster that just appeared towering over him. The beast raised its arms slowly, aiming to crush the intruder like lightning. A black tendril wrapped round Minda's torso, pulling him out of harm's way just as the hand came down, crushing earth instead. Midoriya was one to act quickly. He had experienced so much, he could coordinate well-planned responses in the nick of time to suit the situation, which certainly paid off now. Midoriya wasn't the only quick thinker. The rest of the boys had already lunged into action. Todoroki released a wave of ice that froze the monster's feet, keeping him in place. Seeing that Midoriya made good use of the opportunity to immobilize the monster to a greater degree, shooting a tendril that wrapped its arms to its side. Tenya came with his engines at full speed. His right leg shot ahead of his left, crushing the golem's head. Following, Bakugo released a devastating amount of explosions that crushed the monster completely. There wasn't any time to rejoice. A swarm of those monsters were fast approaching. Working together, Class 1 fended off the monsters as they made their way to the facility, arriving far later than 3 hours given everyone was worn out and tired, gasping for much-needed air. Pixie Bob commended them on their efforts, stating that she had expected them to arrive far later that. Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called Anime Theory. Anime Theory mainly focuses on a large variety of mind-boggling anime theories. If you are interested in content like this, please go check the description below or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. The day was over. Aizawa told the class to get needed rest as their real training would begin the next day. "Good morning, class. Today we will begin a training camp that will increase your strength," Aizawa started, admonishing his students at the break of dawn. The training was geared towards drastically improving their skills and quirk prowess within a short period of time. The training began. Each student took on a different approach that would suit them, working round their weakness and improving, while others worked together to improve their quirks simultaneously. Midoriya's training was quite special. His quirk worked round restraint and was quite similar to Aizawa's binding cloth. So, the teacher took the time to train with him, teaching him how to bind effectively. Aizawa threw out his bind cloth, many lines of the material curving outwards to home in on Midoriya. Midoriya timed the attack. The first strip came. He quickly turned his torso to the right as it glided past him. The second came as he turned to his left next as it glided past him as well. Easily without wasted movements, Aizawa pulled back on those two cloths he'd evaded. It caused them to lurch backwards, and once they did, they collided with Midoriya, wrapping and restraining him. Your quirk is similar to my bind cloth, so I'll be training you. That's an example of what I expect from you. A good restraint should be diverse, easily able to adapt to any change in the target. Sharp and precise. Now you try to bind me, Aizawa explained. The teacher readied himself to receive Midoriya's attack. Midoriya concentrated his strength. He raised his arm, clenching his right fist. Power surged through him, channeling to his arm as 3 tendrils shot out of his knuckles with celerity, headed straight at Aizawa. You focused on speed, good. But your attack is too direct. By raising your arm and taking an aim slowly, it makes me predict where you'll aim easily, especially if the villain has studied your quirk, Aizawa said, yelling instructions as he parried Midoriya's attacks. Using his cloth, he parried 2 tendrils. They had more power and force, but he was able to knock them off course slightly and ducked low as the last tendril blazed past. And when your attack is too central and easily read, Aizawa said, trailing off momentarily. Quickly his arm stretched out, grasping the tendril overhead with his left arm, yanking fiercely. He pulled Midoriya, dragging the boy down to the ground. You get done and by your own bind, Aizawa finished. You'll take it again from the top till you can bind me. The day ended with everyone as tired as the day before. Midoriya was worse off. Aizawa was relentless. He made Midoriya try over and over, getting beat down as he didn't bind Aizawa. The teacher promised they'd continue the pattern till he succeeded. The students set off to make their meal with the ingredients provided to them, munching down hurriedly and greedily. The goal was to fill their bellies. Taste was irrelevant. The third day came. Everybody went to their respective training site and went at it furiously. Aizawa stood intimidatingly over Midoriya, who laid in the dust. Their sessions continued, and instantly he'd noted rapid improvement in Midoriya. He'd taken the advice, and now his attacks weren't as central until they needed to be. The tendrils curved round in an uncertain trajectory. He could easily change, quite easier than bind cloth. He was close to restraining Aizawa, but no smoke. Well, you've certainly improved overnight, but we'll kick things up a notch from here. This time I'll be aiming to bind you as well, and I'll use my quirk. You may think it's unfair, but that's the reality you'll have to face with villains. That was definitely a lot for Midoriya to handle, but Aizawa was correct. A villain wouldn't hold back the full extent of their prowess against him, so he'd have to be ready. He rose up, putting some meters between them as he readied himself. Silence passed between them, aside the agonizing wails of the other students. Aizawa's googles were over his eyes now while he took a stance, but he hadn't attacked. An opportunity Midoriya would capitalize on. Raising his arm and shooting tendrils simultaneously, Midoriya attacked. A tendril took a parabolic path, arching down onto Aizawa, aiming to knock his googles off. The others aimed to come up besides Aizawa and bind his arms and legs. Just as the tendril was about to hit the teacher's googles, it dissolved into thin air. So did the rest of the tendrils. Midoriya's quirk was erased. Now Aizawa attacked, lashing out with those binds to grab Midoriya. Midoriya responded quickly. He jumped, lifting his feet above the ground to evade 2, aimed for his legs, landing directly on the binds to trap them under his feet. Following up, he arched his back low all the way to the ground, using his arms to support, dodging more, aimed for his upper body. Aizawa wouldn't let up. He yanked hard on the bind under Midoriya's feet, pulling them from under him like a rug. It flipped the boy, making him land on his belly. Pain surged through him, but he'd only have a second to groan as the binds overhead lashed down to hit him. Instinctively, he rolled fiercely to his right and transitioned to stand up and begin a run, but he clenched his right fist down on a mound of dirt just before he ran. He ran around, aiming to get out of Aizawa's line of sight. But it was futile. The pro simply turned his gaze to follow him wherever he went. He threw his binds to repel him, but Midoriya ducked and rolled, inching closer. Then Aizawa figured, why wait? He'd charge on as well. The pro was already feeling his eyes drying up, so he'd quickly put this away. He had to do it harshly, or Midoriya would never learn or grow, for that matter. The pro took quick strides, running to meet Midoriya, something that shocked the boy, who was stunned for a second. Aizawa threw his bind directly at Midoriya's neck. Midoriya raised his left arm quickly, allowing it to get wrapped by the bind instead of his neck, keeping his right down as he stopped his run. Got you, Aizawa thought, about to deploy other binds to wrap him up, but just before he could, Midoriya coiled the bind much more around his arm, pulling backwards and disorienting Aizawa, who was about to fall to the ground. A trick out of his own book. Midoriya knew what he had to do. As Aizawa dropped, his gaze did. Midoriya could feel his power being freed. He opened the palm of the same left arm and shot his tendrils out to grab the pro. If this worked, that was it. But Aizawa had caught whiff of the plan. It was quite obvious at that. His hand reached out, supporting all his weight and breaking his fall as he pushed up high into the air, far above the range of Midoriya's attacks. Now Aizawa's quirk was active once more, and the teacher was taking advantage of the bind Midoriya used to wrap himself. The boy tried to undo it quickly, but he was too late. Aizawa pulled threateningly close. The teacher turned, bringing his leg down as it came crashing into Midoriya's skull, rattling his brain and undoing the bind that tied them together. The pain clouded his thoughts, but his body knew what he should do now. As he fell sideways, he threw the dirt he'd hidden in his right arm into Aizawa's face, the dirt finding its way into the spaces in the googles, blinding the teacher. Reflexively, Aizawa closed his eyes to blink the dirt while backing up. Now was the time. Midoriya pushed to 30% power. He realized that if he used it for a short period at that level, it didn't hurt as much as it did over a long time. Taka can aim hole on the ground. His tendrils gained more celerity than before, as they tore through the air, causing gusts of wind, and in a split second they wrapped tightly around Aizawa. Midoriya felt pangs of hurt, and he quickly eased up on the percentage and released his hold. Aizawa smiled. That is after he'd cursed about getting dirt in his eyes. The boy had hatched a smart plan and actually bound him this time, something he didn't expect. "You did good, kid," the teacher praised. The third day was over, as grueling as the last, but they'd gotten used to it just a bit. Now it was time to eat. After their meal, the students decided to play a game. A simple game of prey and predator, where a team of two were either made to scare another or try not to get scared. The games began, and already there were a lot who fell prey to the antics. Altogether, the students were all having a fun time, relaxing and letting go of all that built tension training brought. How quickly that peace would be destroyed. Creeping into the forest came pink fog. Slowly the fog was thicker and more visible. To those that inhaled, the fumes would cause them to get drowsy and fall unconscious in an instant. From a distance, smoke scattered across the sky with the smell of burning bark wafting through the air. But one thing everyone saw clearly were the villains. They'd arrived on scene in tune with the play of events, and now they'd taken one of the pussycats into their custody. "We are part of the vanguard squad of the League of Villains," Spinner the reptilian villain said, explaining his ideals to make Stain's dreams a reality while he unraveled a huge mass of swords strapped together. The students couldn't believe their eyes. How could villains have gotten here? Midoriya searched around frantically for Kota, but he was nowhere to be found. Over the course of days, he'd gotten to know this boy, a cousin of Mandalay's who had refused to open himself to anyone after suffering the loss of his parents. Midoriya had tried many times to talk to him, but he'd failed each time. Now the boy was nowhere to be seen, but Midoriya knew his hideout. "Kota, I know where he is," Midoriya yelled to Mandalay, who had charged the students to get back to camp. He couldn't just go back when he knew where Kota was. He'd have to go get him, and with the approval from Mandalay, Midoriya set off, swinging fiercely and quickly with his tendrils through the forest. "Kota, wait for me," he thought to himself. Just on the rocky lookout that oversaw the whole forest, a large hooded figure loomed behind a small boy. The man's face hidden behind a mask, but his ominous aura spilling out that sent a chill in the air. Soon the boy would realize his presence. Muscular planned to have fun here tonight. It was the first time in a long time he could run loose. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1 Part 5 of What If Deku Got Black Whip Early. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, and so we begin. Quiet sobs escaped from Kota's clenched teeth. Teary-eyed, he took shaky steps backwards, nearing the edge of the lookout point, the place he so fondly used as his hideout. Glancing over the edge, he began to realize just how high up he was for the first time. He obviously didn't want to fall from here, but the masked man in front of him wasn't giving him any options. The figure inched closer to Kota so slowly and menacingly he struck the boy with absolute fear. Muscular had planned to use this elevated surface as a lookout point, apparently to spot prey they'd been assigned to. But he was quite surprised to find someone unaccounted for out here, and a small kid nonetheless. The villain. He complimented Kota's hat, saying he'd prefer it to his mask. Maybe it'd divert people's eyes from his hideous scar if he wore it. Well, Kota obviously didn't look like he wanted a compliment. He'd probably prefer help. How sad, Santa brought the wrong gift. Muscular took his time to slowly remove his mask while Ab spoke. To Kota it seemed like a window of opportunity for him to escape. Turning heels, he started his run in the opposite direction, aiming to scurry down the rocky plain. But in no less than a second, Muscular was on him. The hooded male lunged ahead of him, his features on full display: unkempt short blonde hair, a sharp jawline, a grotesque scar running down his temple to his mouth, and in his left socket was a prosthetic eye, much smaller than his right eye, surrounded by thick flesh. Kota knew this face all too well. He had burned it in his memory with hate. The criminal who has murdered his parents now stood in his way. Running? No, the fun just begun, Muscular said, extending his left arm. From his wrist, thick fibers of muscles began to grow, creeping up his arm until it was engulfed in a thick, strong layer of flesh. The villain clenched his fist as he shot downwards from the rock. He leaped to, aiming to crush the boy with sheer force. Lightning quick, a shady line zigzagged through the air, wrapping itself around Kota. It raised the boy back and high into the air just before the blow got to him. The force of the blow was something else. It had missed its target and exploded on the rocky terrain. Huge torrents of wind swept forward with such intensity it threw Kota and Midoriya off the cliff. The pair free fell down from the cliff, the possibility of them hitting the earth growing with every passing second. But Midoriya thought quickly. He held onto Kota tightly with his left arm while he aimed at a tree. A tendril shot out, fastening itself to a bough. He guided the momentum, swinging into the forest. Since his training, he'd somewhat managed to navigate through the thick growth of the forest, though he could remember in numerous occasions going face first into a tree. But Midoriya waved that thought away. He certainly wouldn't want that happening here. Aim, hold, swing, release seemed easy, but there were so many millisecond decisions Midoriya had to take. At an instant he'd have to choose which branch could support their weight. Time his swing to avoid tree and release quickly enough, and nighttime didn't make matter better. But despite all odds, it seemed his brain was working overtime to keep them alive. This part of the forest was far away from the burning trees and gases, so they were good for now. Midoriya's goal was rendezvous with Mandalay and drop Kota off in a secure location, then see where he could help out. The attack on the camp was bad, but now it was worse for them. Midoriya hadn't bargained to meet a villain up there. He had escaped with Kota quickly and worked with putting a considerable amount of distance between he and the villain in a short period of time, so they were probably far away from him. He was at a huge disadvantage fighting a power-type quirk with a support quirk. His quirk worked around restraint, with creativity. He could provide slight offense, but that was it. He wasn't suited to match a power-type villain, which was why running was the smart thing to do. All this while, Midoriya noticed Kota kept his eyes shut, probably scared of what he'd see if he opened them. Only when Midoriya swung to a stop on sturdy branch did he open his eyes, sobbing silently without speaking. My phone must have fell out while I was swinging, Midoriya thought to himself while he searched his pockets. So reinforcements was a no. His phone had probably dropped out of his loose short pockets down into the forest, and no one knew where he was at the moment. He had to get back quickly. Then he felt it. A sharp pain in his head that overwhelmed him. The pain caught him unaware. Midoriya winced and he dropped from the branch to the ground with Kota in his embrace. Luckily, the branch wasn't far away from the ground, but he still felt the effects of that fall in Kota as well. What was that sharp pain? But he didn't have time to dwell on it. The moment they dropped, Muscular appeared instantly, with ramming his fist into the tree they were in a second ago, obliterating it. A big stroke of luck. Whatever had happened in his head had saved them back then, but now Muscular turned his attention to them instantly. You're pretty good at dodging and running away, huh? I've missed you twice now. This is only fun if you stand and fight though, so no more running. Muscular yelled. Leaping up, he flew down with another right fist to crush the two into the ground. Midoriya managed to roll sharply to his right out of the way of the blow, pushing Kota further ahead as he did. The blow crushed the earth, kicking Midoriya up with gust of air. He barely managed to get his bearings and balance himself well enough to stand upright. Stay far away from both of us as possible, Kota, Midoriya said with a serious tone. Now he had no option but to stand and fight this villain and somehow find a strategy to win. Well, you'd better show me what you're made of, if you want to make it out alive, Muscular yelled, throwing aside his hood. Now he was only in a tank top. The fibers around his left arm flailed loosely in the air and slowly retracted back into his arm. The villain crouched slightly, clenching his fists. He covered his two arms with a thicker layer of muscle that engulfed his back as well. Then he leapt towards Midoriya with a frontal assault, his right arm drawn back. But Midoriya was prepared. For whatever it was worth, his adrenaline was working overtime, making him sharper he had to be if planned on subduing or beating Muscular. The moment Muscular took off, Midoriya timed him. Just before Muscular came close enough, he rolled right below the blow, turning his head to the villain behind him. He flicked his wrist, a tendril shot out, wrapping round Muscular's ankle, and with a sharp tug he drew his arm back, sending the villain crashing into a tree. Whoa, for a puny quirk, that thing sure carries its weight, Muscular mused, excited and not visibly harmed. The fleshy mound had taken the impact of the collision. What could he do to take care of it? Midoriya wondered. Well, there was no use just being indefensive all the time. He had to focus Muscular's attention on him and not Kota. He had an idea he wanted to try. He charged the villain much to his surprise, running up a bit close, then he lunged left to Muscular's blind spot, his left eye. Naturally, the villain would have to turn his head left to see Midoriya, who was outside his line of view. It would only buy him a few seconds, but that was all he needed. Once Muscular turned his head, his face was instantly wrapped with a black tendril covering his eyes. Then like a swing, Midoriya planned to dive between the villain's leg to flip him inside out. But before he got low enough, Muscular instinctively buried his right knee into Midoriya's jaw, kicking him upwards. He grabbed the tendril, pulling back, sending Midoriya towards him. Then he shoved his open palm in Top Boy's chest, sending him crashing into a tree. The pain to Midoriya and force of the attack had been enough to cut the tendril. Midoriya screamed in pain, slumped against the tree. His sternum was throbbing badly. He was sure it was broken, and he was sure that shove had cracked a few of his ribs. Going for my weakness, I. Smart, but not enough, the villain said. Blood trickled down the side of his lips, which he weakly wiped away with his arm, groaning as he did. His plan had failed just as quickly as he'd come up with it. Bakugo. What could they want with Bakugo? Midoriya wondered to himself as Muscular asked of his classmate, but he didn't have long to dwell on that as Muscular charged again with even greater speed. Midoriya was too tired to move, but he willed his body, and the adrenaline began pumping again, making him forget his pain for now. He moved out of the way, allowing the already broken tree to fall on Muscular. But the villain wouldn't be abated. In fact, he'd just been given a weapon. Muscular grabbed the tree with his hands, gripping it so tightly he made indents in the bark, and now he had a bat. He swung it at Midoriya, who had just gotten to his feet. Minor crouches just before letting it swing overhead, and he was just about to get back to his feet again when it happened. That overwhelmingly pain in his head struck again, making him stay put on the ground with his hand to his head, and just above him the tree had swung back again. If he hasn't stayed down and gotten up like he intended to, he'd have been hit in the back and seriously hurt. Just like when Muscular had arrived, was the pain warning him? Well, if it wasn't, it was surely disorienting him, making it hard to focus. I didn't know fighting yet would be this fun. You react fast, Muscular chimed menacingly. This time he'd aimed to plant the tree in the ground right onto Midoriya's back. Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called Anime Theory. Anime Theory mainly focuses on a large variety of mind-boggling anime theories. If you are interested in content like this, please go check the description below or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. You know, you're fighting a clear losing battle. It's obvious my quirk overwhelms yours in every possible aspect, but you keep pressing like you think you actually have a chance with those puny ropes of yours. This is what I hate about heroes, always thinking they'll come out on top, but now you're gonna die, so it's all good. Muscular said with a sadistic tone to his voice, obviously enjoying every bit of this. He heaved the tree high up for the final blow, but got blasted with a wave of water from behind. You killed ... my parents, he stuttered with fear, tears streaming down his cheeks, his palms outstretched and drenched. Oh, them, Muscular said, turning his attention to Kota. His memory jogged as Kota recalled the incident. The villain smiled just at the thought of the heroes who had injured his eye. He held no grudge against them. That wasn't why he killed them. He was merely fulfilling his part in killing, and Kota's parents trying to do their job in preventing him. Sadly, they got killed in the process. So there aren't any hard feelings ... but you'll have to wait your turn. I'll kill you just as soon as I'm done with High, Muscular said to Kota. His words cut short as he was about to turn to refer to Midoriya, who was on the ground. At least that was where he was before. But now he was just inches away from a shocked Muscular. His teeth clenched. Midoriya fought through the pain. His arms pulled to his right side, leashed to two tendrils was a broken tree, the one Muscular had destroyed when he arrived. Midoriya swung it, aiming for the villain's unprotected head. If it had hit, the villain would possibly be knocked out. But instinctively, Muscular dropped the tree and he got his arm up, tanking the blow and pushing Midoriya back. The tree flying off and the boy tumbling. Well, you almost got me there. Muscular dashed at Midoriya with blinding speed as he rose, springing above the ground slightly. Muscular twisted his torso and unraveled himself, his left leg taking the lead, turning and driving home into Midoriya's shoulder. The kick sent him crashing into a tree, something he was getting used to at this point. Pain seared his whole being, his body crying in agony. Gashes on his face and arms bleed profusely, and the shoulder he was kicked on definitely had its bones fractured. He couldn't even feel it anymore. His eyesight blurred. He had slammed body and all into the tree, and now he was barely breathing, all the air in his lungs driven out forcefully. Midoriya began to fade. Almost like his heart stopped, his frame slowly dropped down to the hard ground with a huge thud. Muscular walked over to him gingerly, a smile plastered to his face. He'd relish finishing the boy off as slowly as he could to derive utmost pleasure from it. It was his first kill on being released by the League of Villains. He'd make it memorable, so to speak. A pebble hit him on his head. Muscular turned visibly angry. "Okay, boy, you're really asking me to kill you first," Muscular yelled, Dakota thudding his way towards him. "Don't take your eyes off me," Midoriya yelled. He aimed at Muscular, releasing more power of his quirk. He felt about a surge of 30%. The whips flew at Muscular like a rain of bullets, so fast he couldn't react in time. Lightning quick, they easily wrapped him from his shoulders down. "You've been holding back this burst of power. Seems you were holding back something else from me." "Well, so was I. Now I'm gonna come at you with my full force now and kill you," Muscular said, angrier than ever. A large mass of muscle fibers escaped from within him, wrapping his entirety in a huge layer of flesh like a suit. His form engulfed in flesh, the whip broken during the expansion of flesh. How does he have so much power? Midoriya wondered, panting, pain surging through him from the usage. Even 30% wasn't enough. How was he going to beat this maniac? Was he going to lose here? No, he answered himself, clearing those thoughts. He'd protect Koda like a true hero would, like All Might would, with a smiling face. His lips slowly arched into a smile. "Don't worry, Koda, I'll protect you," he said to the boy now behind him. He had a plan now in the most dire of moments, something he should have realized earlier. It was risky, but this was all he had left. It hit him again, that pain in his head. Slowly he'd realized what it was. Each time it was warning him about impending danger. He didn't wait to find out if he was right. He jumped, focusing his whip on the ground, shooting himself higher into the air. He was right. Just as he left, Muscular had bulldozed through where he was. Midoriya now hovered over Muscular. "I won't hold back any power. I'll have to use Black Whip at full power for this." He aimed his two hands at Muscular. He let loose all the power he'd been holding back, letting Black Whip's power rampage like the first day he'd use it, but this time he'd guide it. Black tendrils shot out rapidly with their powers unrestricted. They flew onto the fibers of flesh. With his mind, he guided the tendrils as they forced their way into the spaces between the muscles. Pain bubbled within his body, the burden far too great as his body sizzled and burned with steam leaving his skin and blood gushing from every wound he had. He roared, pushing past his limit as the whips began to branch themselves, multiplying and seeping into the slight crevices between the muscles and wrapping round them tightly. "What the heck?" Muscular said, confused, but the plot was already set. "Now!" Midoriya screamed, pulling back his arms, ignoring the pain of his broken shoulder, and along with the pull, the might of Black Whip tore the end-to-end attachment of the muscles, leaving the flesh hanging to the whip strands and parts of Muscular's now exposed body. "Let's end this." He let himself drop to the earth, Muscular rising up in the air in the process. Then as he landed, he pulled down, willing his quirk to forcefully lash out Muscular's exposed body, crashing him into the hard ground. The ground crumbled with the collision. Debris flew everywhere, driven by powerful gusts of wind, and embedded in a large crater was a passed-out villain. "I did it," Midoriya said, trying to make his way to Koda. His insides felt like they were melting. Numerous bones were shattered, and he had lost a lot of blood. All he saw was red before he dropped to the ground. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out, mortals. Have a fantastic day. Hey, what is up, mortals? It is welcome to Season 1 Part 6 of What If Deku Got Black Whip Early. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the story. Everything had gone by like a flash before Midoriya even knew it. From the battle at the camp against the villains, the class of Wano had fought with the villains and avoided major casualties save for the fact that Bakugo had been captured. It was a huge blow for all. Not even the school's image had been spared, but Midoriya took the brunt of it all, with the weighing feeling that he'd failed in protecting his friend even though he was just within a fingertip's reach. Bruised, battered, and swollen, Midoriya recuperated in the hospital. He had come up on top against the villain Muscular and even gaining a new quirk. He talked it out with All Might and found out it belonged to the fourth user, a quirk called Danger Sense. It had been vital to ensure that he won the battle, but the whole affair wasn't all too favorable for him. He suffered from multiple fractured bones, bruises, and lacerations all over. Even his muscles and bones felt like water from the amount of pain he incurred using Black Whip on full throttle, and his mind was exhausted from the heavy toll of his new quirk. But still, all he could think of at that time was how he could help in saving Bakugo. Then he got his chance, when a few of his classmates had came up with the idea to do so, which they brought to him, and Midoriya was all too willing to oblige. So many things had occurred just under the space of one night. The group had arrived at a warehouse where they thought Bakugo would be held captive, only to be shocked with the discovery of a Namu production factory. Then the shocking resurgence of All for One followed, with a fated reunion. A gruesome spell that saw to the end of the legacy of the #1 hero and the passing on of the torch of the symbol of peace. Next, it's your turn. The message of All Might shot directly at him. He realized that now it was his turn to carry that symbol of peace. The following week saw to more changes as Class 1 had been assigned to dormitories, and now they were tasked with securing their provisional licenses. So here Midoriya stood, dressed in his black hero costume outlined by white patterns and black gloves and red boots. Fit for the job, except he was confused. Gym Gamma had been set, the terrain laid out by Cementos with large jutting rock columns building a conducive battle environment for all fighting styles. Scattered across the entire field were clones of the hero ectoplasm. They were tasked with the duty of assisting the students in developing their special moves that apparently would give them the edge in the provisional license exams. Most of the class were already at it, firing away furiously with relentless attacks to the clones to either draw more power from their quirks or create something new. But what could he possibly do for a special move? What did he lack? What did he need to get better? He wondered as he watched his classmates. He had now come upon two quirks, Black Whip and Danger Sense. The question was, what could he do to utilize both of them to a considerable capacity without harming himself? If he used Black Whip too much, he'd experience this immense burning pain, and Danger Sense made his head hurt intensely. How could he use them in moderation yet effectively? He took a while to look at Zero. He watched as he attacked a clone furiously, and he studied him. His Black Whip and Zero's tape were similar, and even the usage used for restraint and mobility. He tried to see where Zero lacked in, what hindered him, and possibly apply it to himself. Then he got an idea. It was obvious he couldn't increase his usage of Black Whip. His body wasn't ready for it, and he didn't have control over Danger Sense. But what if he could get equipment to supplement? He had already received an earful from an ectoplasm clone that had suggested he'd get support gear to develop his quirk if he couldn't think of a special move. So he set out of the gym to the first floor of UA, sending a greeting to All Might as he passed him on the way out of the gym. At the development studio, Izuku met Mei. She was explosive. Literally, she came exploding out through the door and landed on top him. He remembered her from the sports festival. Apparently she was a student of the support course. So what can I do for you? Blasters, full body suit. Mei asked Midoriya giddily upon hearing of upgrades. Ochako and Tenya were here as well, working on their upgrades as well. Well, Midoriya started, fumbling to get out of the suit Mei had forced on him. See, I thought of it and I saw some of the things I was lacking in. My quirk allows me to restrain people and allows me to get around. But I realized with it I'm not mobile enough. If I choose one direction to head to with my quirk, I'm not able to easily change it. I don't have enough strength in my body to change midair, and also I'm not quick enough. It feels as if the air is pushing against me when I try to move. Midoriya started with his hand to his chin and a poised, focused look on his face, rambling while Mei listened with rapt attention and much enthusiasm. Also, my quirk is more of a support quirk. I realized I'd have to battle strategically if it came to a slugfest with power-type quirks, so maybe I could get something that helped me use it more offensively and powerfully, Midoriya added. He knew if he unleashed a higher percentage of Black Whip he could easily attain more offensive power, but at a big detriment to himself. That really is a lot of things to do. I'm so excited, and I have the perfect ideas to do just that. Give me a second. They responded chirpily, bouncing on the sole of her feet and rummaging through heaps of scattered junk tech till she pulled out some blueprint. She took out a pen and began to make some adjustments to the plans on a work table, and in a few minutes she bounced back to Midoriya. Well, you really think you can pull this off? Midoriya asked Mei, unsure. That's why I'm in the support course, isn't it? But it'll take a while and it'll have to get inspected, right, Power Loader? Mei said, passing through blueprints over to the teacher. Yeah, we can have this ready in a couple of days, but it'll have to be inspected and passed. Drop off your hero suit for the modifications, Power Loader said to Midoriya, ruffling through the thin sheets of paper. Trust me, it's gonna be amazing, Mei said with glittering eyes. Some days later at the Gamma Gym, Class 1 was still at it, practicing on their special moves. All Might was making rounds to check on the progress of the students. Bakugo had gone far. He'd perfected this concentrated explosion that was precise with a cutting edge. Testing it out, he aimed at a rock and punched a hole right through it with his AP shot, but a huge chunk of the rock tore off, cascading down right where All Might stood. Everyone was petrified, even the former symbol of peace, as they watched the rock plummet. Black lightning, tree of woe. A black strip blazed through air, zigzagging like lightning, traveling forward as time seemed to slow, and then it made its way to the rock, and then the tendril began to divide, separating into multiple strips, forcing themselves at the rock's attack and breaking into its cracks and crevices all the way through to the other side of the rock, cleanly destroying the rock into smaller chunks. Then swiftly the branch-like tendrils wrapped onto the rubble, holding them afloat in the air. The rubble was pulled back, tossed aside. Midoriya used the momentum to propel himself forward, dashing through the air at quick pace, effortless, without much impeding his quickness as he'd come to a halt in front of All Might. All Might, are you all right? Why, yeah, sure, I'm fine, All Might stuttered in awe. What the heck was that, Deku? Were you just hovering above the ground right now? Ijiro asked, shocked as much as everyone else in the gym was. It was no surprise considering how Midoriya looked and what he'd just done. His suit was entirely different, with a sleek black shiny texture that appeared streamlined with red patterns tracing his sides, metal shoulder pads, with his regular red belt, but there were many changes now. He sported a white knee pads extending from his thighs down to his boots. His red boots as well had one of the biggest changes, with armor laced to it. The soles had a circular compartment that could slide open. Implanted in his boots were devices that emitted magnetic pulses that acted in contrast with the Earth's magnetic field. It pushed him off the Earth and allowed him to hover above the ground, increasing mobility. Along with his streamlined suit that reduced air resistance and black whip, he could pull himself along rather quickly and fluidly change his direction mid-air, but the boots worked in short bursts. The other upgrade was his arms, ridden with armored gauntlets and gloves. At either sides of his arms were small cylindrical gadgets that acted like pistons. Midoriya could flood his quirk into them and shoot black whip at a faster rate, just like he'd done earlier. "Well, Midoriya, you really got yourself some rad tech," Ijiro said after asserting him. "But what's with the ominous name, Tree of Woe?" Ijiro asked. "Well, I asked Fumikage for help with naming my technique and he came up with it." Midoriya chuckled. "Off figures." Ijiro nodded in understanding. Upgrades ready. Midoriya was ready for the provisional license exams. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out, mortals. Have a fantastic day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1 Part 7 of What If Deku Got Black Whip Early. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the story. It was time. The days had expired. Sweat and blood had been burnt at work. Hours of labor all paid up to develop special moves or improve their quirks. Now it was time to put it to the test. Midoriya inhaled deeply with much difficulty. The air here felt sour and stale, almost like it had soaked up all the tension and anxiety the class exuded. They'd gotten off their bus right in front of the Takoba National Stadium where the provisional license exams would take place, and then the class met their competition. Different schools, some said to be on par with the prestigious UA High. The intensity the rivaling schools gave off said it all. It didn't take long for the other schools to make an impression on the class of one. Sayurashi gave a vigorous bow as an apology after he'd briefly interrupted their huddle, bleeding from his skull in the process after his head met the concrete from such a forceful bow. Despite his queer behavior, the lad wasn't to be underestimated. He'd gotten top scores in the UA entrance exams but refused the offer. Shoto warned the student he'd be a force to reckon with. Over 1,000 students were gathered inside the National Stadium as they listened to the explanation of the exams and received the news that was neither all too shocking or pleasant. Only 100 candidates would be selected from the first exam to participate in the actual exam. It was a given. This wasn't fun and games. It was an obvious bar they'd have to exceed if they wished to get the license that would allow them to work like pros and use their quirks publicly. It wasn't going to be easy. On a slightly brighter side, the first exam dealt with speed. Izuku gave a quick sigh of relief. It didn't alleviate any of the knots in his stomach concerning this exam, but he'd been training and developing his quirk around speed and mobility. This exam was for him. He hoped. They would be given targets and 6 balls. The targets would have to be placed in places where they could be easily seen. The aim was to protect all 3 of your targets from being lit up by the balls and at the same time eliminate 2 opponents to qualify. The place the candidates stood in began to fall apart, and the students soon found themselves in the grounds the exams would take place. They were only minutes away from slugging it out on this varied combat ground. All the students were fully suited up in their costumes. Midoriya fiddled with his gear a bit to be sure everything was in order. He had massive improvements with his upgrade done, and he'd hoped to see the fruits of his development here and possibly get his license. No, not possibly, he would get it. The provisional license to him would bring him closer to actualizing and carrying the legacy of the symbol of peace. All might left him. Lastly, he strapped the targets to himself just like everyone was doing. One on the inside of his left arm, a tricky target to hit, another on his right breast, and the last on his waist. The exams had begun. The wisest thing to do was to stay as a team and attack. Midoriya knew this, which was why he tried to rally Wana together, but people like Bakugo and Shoto decided to play it solo, leaving the posse. The attacks came flying in to disorient the class. Ketsubutsu High, a school they'd come to learn of earlier on, attacked, spearheaded by Yoshindo. Midoriya crouched his knees. He centered his weight down onto his feet, applying heavy pressure to the sole of his feet. Instantly, the pressure propulsion the mechanism in his boot. The circular compartment swirled open and the magnetic propulsion was activated, hovering him off the ground. He activated Black Whip and shot a tendril from his palm, the bind wrapping tight around a huge boulder. The momentum sprung him forward effortlessly. Air resistance and friction were reduced to bare minimum with his upgrades, like being pulled along by a ski. Midoriya weaved and dodged all around the orange balls headed for him, sailing through the air with celerity, and took cover behind the rock. He slumped against the rock and inhaled sharply, pulling his respirator over his mouth. "Let's do this, guys," Midoriya yelled in encouragement to his classmates. The class pushed on, countering the attacks of their rivals. At this point it was a stalemate. How quickly everything would change. And Midoriya felt it before it happened. Well, more like it punched him in the head. An overwhelming pain seared his brain, causing him to crumble to the ground with him head in his arms. A sign of things to come. He'd almost even forgotten that he had this danger sense, a premonition quirk of the fourth user that allowed him to tell impending doom. Sadly, he didn't have control over it, and it came as it pleased, just like now. "Guys, why you have to get away? Something's about to," Midoriya managed to stutter. But it fell to deaf ears, of rather the preoccupied ears of his class, who probably didn't hear him or didn't understand what he meant, considering none of them knew he possessed this quirk. Then it happened. The earth began to tremble and rumble, making Midoriya's teeth chatter and his body bounce. With one burst, the earth beneath their feet ruptured and tore apart, sending him and the rest of his class hurtling. "Ugh," Midoriya groaned, slowly coming to. A voice boomed throughout the stadium announcing that an assassin from Shiksu has passed, crushing over 100 examinees in the process. Midoriya pushed away the rubble he was trapped underneath. Getting to his feet and dusting himself, he asserted the situation and realized the attack had split him and the rest of the class. He was now alone. But somehow the announcement seemed to make him giddy. His blood bubbled in excitement. He slowly turned around to move in the other direction, but then he gripped his head in pain, his head throbbing sharply once again. But just as he did, a hand passed by where his left arm was with a bang, and hand aiming to hit his target. Staggering, Midoriya managed to sidestep, letting Kami, a girl from Shiksu, pass by. That was close. His guard was down for a second and he almost got tagged. "You're kind of cute," Kami said, charging towards Midoriya, trying to catch him while he was still gathering. But Midoriya was alert. Starting a run of his own, he closed the distance and leaped. He used his toes to pressure his boots and the propulsion shot him higher into the air. He turned to face a shocked Kami, who just turned to face him. Midoriya launched attack of his own, throwing an orange ball aiming to hit her target, but she weaved away from the ball's path. Just as he dropped to the ground crouched, Midoriya rose quickly, aiming to keep his attention on Kami, but she was gone in that split second. "Where is?" Midoriya started, confused, but he already suspected even without danger sense. Turning sharply, he saw Kami behind him, aiming for his target again. Smartly, he pushed her hand away and aimed a ball of his own at her target, driving it at her. But her reflexes were sharp. Out of nowhere, she dropped down, did a back roll away from him. "Oh, you're good too, but you won't be able to beat me, Kami-chan." Midoriya smiled. He raised his right arm up, using his left arm to brace. He flowed Black Whip into the aperture on the gauntlets on his hand. The space filled. The device instantly reacted, shooting the tendril. Black lightning. Kami couldn't even react. The tendril blazed past her left side in an instant. She blinked, trying to regain her composure. "That was quick, but you're a bad aim," she said. "I wasn't aiming for you," Midoriya said with a smile on his face. Kami turned her head quickly to see what he meant, but it was already set. Midoriya pulled back his arm sharply and the whip retracted, coming back the same way it came, but this time with the ball he'd thrown earlier. Skillfully, he sharply pulled the ball. Controlling Black Whip, he hit the target on her left shoulder, lighting it up. "That's one down," Midoriya said confidently. The girl paused for a while and began to chuckle oddly. The moment he blinked, she was gone. He felt a sharp push on his back, driving him to the ground with his arm pinned painfully to his back. He wondered whether her quirk had to do with teleportation, as Kami now had him restrained and at her mercy. "I wonder what you have planned," she whispered in his ear. Before she could deal any real damage, he nudged her in the midsection with the tip of his elbow and pushed her off, getting to his feet. Streaks of orange began to whiz past them. The Ketsubutsu students had arrived to attack. Midoriya dodged the attacks, and just like that, Kami was gone, but now Ochako had appeared and was about to be the center of their attacks. A tendril fastened to her waist as Midoriya swerved towards her in an instant, sweeping her off her feet and into his arms as he fled faster than the students could catch up and took shelter behind a rock. He scanned the area from behind, but it was quite odd that Ochako hadn't acted to save herself. She could have easily floated away from there, and he just remembered seeing a lit-up target on her left arm. Midoriya turned in time to slap an orange ball out of her hands. "You're Kami, right? So that's your quirk," he said, calm and company. He wondered why Danger Sense hadn't alerted him of Kami. Was it because he didn't view the image of Ochako as a threat? The Ochako doppelganger smiled and began to morph into Kami but nude. Midoriya was somewhat disoriented by her appearance but was able to fend off her flurry of attacks, dodging left, right, crouch, and sidestep. Training with Aizawa had honed his reflexes. Help was on the way as the real Ochako and Hanta had made their way onto the scene. Outnumbered, Kami was forced to flee in her birthday suit. "We'll meet again, Izuku," she chuckled as she fled. He was happy to meet up with his friends, but he wouldn't drop his guard. Midoriya ensured they were really his classmates. He didn't want another episode like that recurring. Midoriya began to plot with Ochako and Zero. There was no time to be lost. Only 100 could pass and already 30 people had passed the exams. It was a race against time. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out, mortals. Have a fantastic day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 2 Part 1 of What If Deku Got Black Whip Early. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, and so we begin. Okay, so that's what we'll do, Izuku said with resolve to Ochako and Hanta. After that wild encounter with Kami, a student from Shiketsu High, Midoriya was rejoined by 2 of his classmates, and after ascertaining if they were actually his classmates, he conjured a plan that could possibly see them through this stage of the exam. Miro, the Hero Public Safety Commission, announced the passing of 53 examinees. The pressure was high to secure a spot to participate in the actual exams. The examinees flocked in large groups to prey on weaker groups. Then they would fight amongst themselves over who got to get the target last. And now the small team of Midoriya, Zero, and Ochako were confronted with a large group throwing balls at them to hit their targets. But this is what they expected and prepared for. Quickly, they small unit mobilized, Uraraka to the front lines. With stones she already touched, she formed a sort of barrier shielding them from the rate of balls momentarily, giving Zero and Izuku enough time to prepare. Zero tapered one end of his tape to Izuku's right gauntlet, continuously spawning the tape from his elbow. Midoriya began his dash, ducking underneath the rubble screen. He applied pressure to his boots and it jolted him off the ground. He had already studied the layout of his surroundings and knew what he was aiming for. Swerving his torso to the left, he dodged an incoming ball. He shot out a tendril from his left gauntlet that wrapped around a boulder that was just in front of the first line of the large group, crouching his upper body low with his legs wide apart. Izuku began to move rapidly towards the other examinees, as if he was pulled across the water with a jet ski. His position perfectly guarded his targets. The balls they threw bounced off harmlessly. In less than a second, he was in front of the first examinee with his propulsion deactivated. The examinee tried to hit Izuku's target once he was upright. Midoriya seamlessly released his hold on the rock. Aiming and wrapping another tendril around a rock that was far out left, he evaded the attack and began to travel quickly along a radius around the huddled group, all the while pulling Zero's tape that got stuck to the first man. Midoriya began to travel round as fast as he could. Times when his propulsion timed out, he ran with all his might. The group soon realized his plan and directed their fire at him. A well-timed shot managed to hit its mark and light one of Midoriya's targets. Now that he was no longer crouched, Midoriya was barely managing to duck beneath the balls. He knew he had to pull this off quick or he'd be in serious trouble. Detaching from the first rock, he latched onto another far right of his position, bending round a stretch and tapering more confused examinees. Those who reacted fast enough began to move outside of his range to attack, but Uraraka had dropped her rock screen now and covered for him, combating them with the skills she'd gotten during her internship. Midoriya pressed on, latching onto the final rock pedestal he saw, completing a full circle, huddling and mangling a large number of examinees together with Zero's durable sticky tape. The few Uraraka tussled with ran off after seeing their mates being incapacitated. Unable to move, Midoriya, Zero, and Uraraka picked off the examinees easily and made their way into the actual exams. The actual exams were rather anticlimactic, considering the fact that they'd been in a race against time to qualify. Rescuing civilians from the wrecked grounds was kind of a downer for others, but not to Midoriya. He saw it as an opportunity to work on his relation with victims. But now he was getting an earful from a little kid based on his poor reaction to the situation. Instantly adjusting, he reassured the child and scooted off to the first aid station, holding the child carefully. Then it happened. A sharp pang flooded his head, causing him to drop the child as Midoriya fell to the ground, clutching his head. "Hey, I'm definitely deducting points for that," the child began to bicker, to which Midoriya apologized solemnly. But his danger sense had struck out of the blue, which only meant one thing. Something bad was about to happen. Right on cue, a large explosion went off, catching every examinee's attention. Over the comm, the arrival of the villains was announced, and they as the heroes were to suppress them while still rescuing. Just great. Midoriya managed to take the boy to shelter and return back to the scene. The number 10 hero gang Orca was charging towards the shelter with a legion of villains. Shindo from a rivaling school steps up as well. Using his vibrate quirk, he destroys the earth with huge tremors to disorient the villains. But gang Orca was unfazed and plotting something. Danger sense kicked in again, and Midoriya acted fast. Charging up his gauntlet with Black Whip, he fired a high-paced tendril at gang Orca, the wind rippling with the impact on fire. Black Lightning, Tree of Woe controlling the tendril, Midoriya caused it to split into 4 parts, branching out and wrapping around gang Orca. That should hold him, Midoriya thought, but he was underestimating the hero. Orca emitted a paralyzing sound that stunned Shindo. Then sharply twisting his torso, he pulled Midoriya to him with inhumane strength and speed, driving his shiny black head into Midoriya's nose. Blood sprayed from his nostrils. The pain caused him to lose his hold on the villain. Midoriya stumbled to the ground, clutching his nose as gang Orca was probably about to paralyze him as well. In the nick of time, a strong gust flew overhead, pushing the villain back. Inasa and Shoto had arrived to combat the villain, but it appeared that the two were at loggerhead, refusing to work with one another till Midoriya spoke some sense into them after saving Shindo from a fatal encounter with Todoroki's fire. He left them and raced off towards the shelter. The villains were now trying to attack it, flipping over a rock and skidding to a stop right in front of the shelter. Midoriya surged Black Whip mildly through his gauntlets. Their purpose was to produce high output from little percentage of his quirk. The whip shot out like a bullet, hitting 2 goons square on the jaw, knocking them out. Midoriya retracted his tendrils and shot out another one that wrapped around a 3rd goon. Hovering above the ground, he pulled the goon towards himself, traveling towards the goon simultaneously. He raised his knee sharply and drove it into his jaw once they collided, knocking out the 3rd. But now the goons were beginning to swarm him. He was getting outnumbered till backup came, evening the odds. They fought the goons. Midoriya punched, kicked, restrained, and slammed bodies together with his quirk, adrenaline providing fuel to aid his reflexes. Midoriya got to know that a few number of victims were left to be saved, and they just had to hold out for a bit. The goons were thinning in the numbers of those who weren't knocked out, and now Midoriya could focus his attention to gang Orca, who apparently was caught in a firestorm but appeared unfazed. I didn't want to use this, but it could work in putting Orca down, Midoriya thought to himself. During the training to create special moves, he hadn't come up with any in particular. But May from the support course had told him about one other special function his gear had. Possibly it could help them win this. Midoriya readied himself, getting his body into position to tank the backlash. He stretched out his 2 arms and began to charge Black Whip at a high percentage, power lines running black along his gear. Okay, Midoriya started before he stopped after hearing the announcement over the comm. The exams were concluded as all the victims had been rescued. Midoriya powered down and breathed a sigh of relief. The exams were over now. He hoped the results would be good. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome Season 2 Part 2 of What If Deku Got Black Whip Early. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, and so we begin. I don't get it, I just don't understand it, your quirk is trash. It couldn't even rival mine in the least, but how come you've been able to keep yourself one step ahead of me? Bakugo said with his back to Midoriya. Kaken, Midoriya silently said. They had concluded the provisional license exams with Midoriya passing and getting his license while Bakugo did not. The students had returned to Hyde Alliance to rest up, but Bakugo had called Midoriya out for a chat of sorts. I could remember when we were younger and you were quirkless. You always fawned over my quirk, but right here in Ground Beta you bested my quirk and you went on from there to grow stronger and stronger with a simple support quirk. Bakugo continued in a low tone. You were quirkless, powerless. There wasn't any hope of you fighting me, less of winning, but here you are doing just that. It makes me so damn pissed. So right here, right now, I'm taking you on. I want to prove that I'm more superior to your trash quirk, Bakugo yelled, facing Midoriya and staring him in the eye intensely. Kaken, I understand how you're feeling, but we can't fight here. It's against the rules. We could do this in a training session, Midoriya said, apprehensive to the whole idea of fighting. Honestly, he didn't really understand what Bakugo was angry at, but this wasn't the way to solve it. Shut it, what do you understand? I'm the one who feels damn quirkless now, you bastard, Bakugo growled, his scowl deepening, and he stretched his arms out. Bakugo, please, we don't have to, Midoriya pleaded, but he stopped talking. A sharp pain throbbed his head. Danger sense. Slowly he'd become accustomed to the quirk's signals, and the pain from it was less intense than usual. It meant something bad was about to happen, and the quirk was always on the money with its predictions. Bakugo came blazing towards Midoriya, with a front thrust of his palm shoving an explosion towards Midoriya. Danger sense had already forewarned him, and Midoriya knew that it was a matter of seconds before what the quirk foretold happened. So when Bakugo's attack came, his reaction was preemptive. He swerved his head to the side away from Bakugo's palm, but the heat from the explosion singed Midoriya's shoulder. It's not a matter of what you want, you damn nerd. Either fight me with your all or get hurt, Bakugo yelled, lunging his knee into Midoriya's gut, sending the boy tumbling. Midoriya gripped his midsection, getting up on one knee. Just hold on, Bakugo, we can talk this out, Midoriya pleaded. His pleas fell to dead ears. Bakugo launched himself towards Midoriya once again. His palms red hot, Midoriya raised his left arm. A black tendril shot through the dark night into the air and gripped fastly to the top of the building Midoriya was backing. He zipped up from the ground just as Bakugo drove his two palms forward, unleashing a wave of explosion that tore through the lower level of the building. Midoriya was left dangling in the air, panting as he looked down to Bakugo. This was bad. He was far too underprepared for this battle. He didn't have any support gear on him. Why are you running, damn it, Deku? You don't know how I feel. I feel like I'm chasing your shadow, Bakugo said, frustrated. He blasted his way into the air, closing the distance between himself and Midoriya quickly. Midoriya could see tears in his eyes. He slowly came to understand what this was about. Bakugo felt exactly how Midoriya did before he got his power from All Might. Sharply, Midoriya struck out his leg and kicked Bakugo in the face before he came any closer. Izuku placed his legs on the wall of the building and kicked off. He released his tendril. Free falling, he spotted and wrapped another tendril around a rusty lamppost. Swinging round it skillfully, he landed on his feet. He had put some distance between himself and Bakugo, who was tending to his jaw and walking slowly. No, Bakugo, you're wrong. I do understand how you feel. I was always chasing your shadow too, always behind you, wanting to catch up to you. But you know, being behind isn't always a bad thing. It's what drove me to become better, to strive to be better than you, Midoriya said, taking a stance. He crouched his knees and crossed his hands over his chest. Black tendrils began to stream out from his palms while Izuku's expression darkened. If it's a fight you want, come get it, Izuku said, accepting Bakugo's battle invitation. Izuku could see Bakugo smile a bit before his rival wiped the years from his eyes. Midoriya understood that Bakugo needed this to clear his head, release all his pent-up frustration and confusion. Bakugo began to charge, dashing towards Izuku. Midoriya flicked his wrist, sending a tendril at Bakugo. Bakugo's guard was up as he smacked the tendril away with an explosion, sending it off its path, but the string merely altered its direction, wrapping round his neck. Midoriya tugged on the tendril, drawing Bakugo in, causing him to drop his guard. Izuku leapt, driving his right knee into Bakugo's chin, causing his head to snap backwards. Bakugo caught himself. He didn't let the kick disorient him. He grabbed Midoriya's knee with his hand, letting a mild explosion go off. But the impact made Midoriya go a 180 degrees in the air. Bakugo grabbed his shirt while he was in the air and slammed to the ground. Midoriya didn't let up as well. He got thrown down, but the moment he hit the ground, he wrapped Bakugo's leg with a tendril and yanked his arm, sending Bakugo to the ground too. Pain surged his back, but Izuku's adrenaline counteracted it. He got to his knee and aimed his two hands at Bakugo, wrapping him tightly with tendrils into a cocoon. Izuku sighed. It was over, or so he thought. Boom! The tarred ground crumbled as Bakugo shot off it with huge explosions. His hands were on the ground. Even though he was restrained, his explosions couldn't. He flew into the air. Midoriya was taken along, wriggling as he climbed high into the sky. He didn't know what Bakugo was planning, but it wouldn't end well for both of them. Bakugo sent another explosion out, ensuring they'd keep going higher till Bakugo stopped and began falling while Midoriya was still going up. He realized in horror, and danger sense told him too. The collision between two of them would be disastrous, and then they'd fall to the ground. Izuku was certain Bakugo had lost it. Quickly, Izuku released Bakugo from his restraints. He leaned back in the air and got his legs up with his head facing down, planning to use Bakugo as a launch pad to send himself down and prevent a much worse collision. Bakugo set off small explosions, turning in the air and catching the soles of Midoriya's shoes in his hand before they dug into his back. Die! Bakugo screamed, letting a roaring explosion fly. The force kicked Bakugo up higher into the air and sent Midoriya blazing down to earth. Midoriya descended fast. He was in serious trouble. If he collided with the ground, there was no telling what would happen. Subconsciously, he seemed to draw power from within. Izuku was summoning on strength he'd never used before. Lines of energy began to run through his body. He channeled it, let it flow through him. He'd been used to limiting his power using Black Whip, and as this power came, it was limited to 10%. Izuku clenched his fist as green sparks flew from his body, and his eyes lit up luminescent. Detroit Smash! He yelled and threw his fist just as he collided with the ground. A huge shockwave erupted with smoke, hindering Bakugo's sight. What was that? Bakugo wondered about, keeping himself in the air with explosions, trying to get a clear view of what happened to Deku. He didn't have time to think twice. Midoriya came bursting out from within the smokescreen, quicker than he'd ever been, startling Bakugo, his eyes glowing neon green. He drove his fist deep into Bakugo's gut, knocking the air out of him. Adeptly, he flicked the same wrist still in Bakugo's stomach, tendrils coiling themselves round the crimson-eyed boy's torso. Then Midoriya threw him down to earth. Bakugo cushioned his fall with medium-scale explosions as he got to his feet, watching Midoriya land unhurt. So you were still hiding your power from me? I'll kill you, Deku, if that's what it takes to get you to fight me serious. Bakugo screamed, angrier than Midoriya had ever seen him. The explosions at his palms cackled with deadly intents all over. Danger sense went haywire, drumming on his skull signs of bad intentions. He only had a second to react. Bakugo cupped his right fist in his open left palm and fired off a compressed balls of explosions at him. Midoriya knew the AP shot's piercing power. It had punched a hole in a rock, and it would have done same to him had he not rolled out of the way. Bakugo, that was dangerous. You could have. Midoriya paused. He looked into Bakugo's eyes. His once-upon-a-time friend was consumed purely by rage, void of any capacity to reason. Midoriya knew he had to finish this, or getting hurt was the least of their problem. He managed to leap away from another flurry of explosions sent his way, putting distance between him and Bakugo. He could hear sharp footsteps. People were coming their way. What he'd normally do was to stall so Aizawa or another teacher would put an end to this. But he knew he had to give closure for both him and Bakugo. He would end it with his next move. Midoriya had already begun to fatigue from using 3 quirks at once. I'm going to do what you want, Kaken. I'll finish this with as much strength as I can muster, Midoriya said, dead serious. I wouldn't have it any other way, Bakugo growled. Midoriya surged one for all through him, cranking up his usage to 40%. His muscles, bone, and body burned with pain. He ignored it. This was the final act. He planned to give his all. Black tendrils poured from his hands, waving wildly in the air. Midoriya took a crouched stance, ready. Bakugo leapt in the air, explosions blowing from his arms one after the other as he began to spin, rapidly turning into a human torpedo as he launched himself at Midoriya, tearing through the air at blinding speeds. Midoriya was ready and alert. He leapt high in the air with a backflip, letting Bakugo blaze by him. Midoriya shot his tendrils while he was upside down, Bakugo in view. The black whips aimed specifically at the outward region of the torpedo, grabbed and restrained Bakugo's arms at elbows, stopping his movement. This ends now, Midoriya declared, landing back in his position. With his arms above his head, he used his Herculean strength to slingshot Bakugo back to himself. Midoriya twisted his upper torso with a poised punch, reducing his usage to 15%. Smash! His fist collided with Bakugo's back, driving the spiky blonde into the ground, creating a crater with Bakugo's body at the center. I did it. I finally beat you, Kaken, Midoriya said with wobbly feet and blurred vision, but a smile plastered across his face. The toll of using 3 quirks evidently wearing him out. From a distance, he could make out the figures of All Might and Aizawa rushing towards them just before he passed out, falling on an equally passed out Bakugo. He was certainly in big trouble, but he knew what he and Kaken gained from this fight was worth it. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials, Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day.